council members that are here. Margaret Kaiser, served 8 years, represents the Atlanta and East Point area to my left. Micah Gravely is here. There's Micah Gravely. Right there. He served 2 years, represents the Douglasville, Douglas County, and Paulding County area in business development. Senator Underwood, you want to introduce your purpose?
Sure. First of all, thank you for allowing us to come to Mercer University. We appreciate them opening up their facilities. They have a wonderful, beautiful campus that I see every year in the state budget. And we're delighted to be able to be here. I've been here many times, especially to the medical school, and they do a phenomenal job with primary health care physicians and workforce development, and we're absolutely delighted that they play that role in our great state of Georgia. Today we have Senator Kirk Thompson, who's here from my home county of Gwinnett County, and he represents the southern end of Gwinnett County. Senator Thompson, would you like to say a word?
Because I know it's going to be a long prayer now, but thanks for having us. Thanks for hosting us.
Thank you. And to the north of my county, I have Hogg County and Senator Butch Miller. Senator Miller.
Thank you for hosting us today. It's great to be in Macon. This is my birthplace. I'm glad to be here, and it's a beautiful campus, and we look forward to an informative afternoon.
Oh, thank you. And before everyone leaves, I know because some of us have to leave earlier and are not going to be able to stay for the full meeting, just a couple of housekeeping measures. The next meeting will be in Gwinnett County, and will be at Georgia Gwinnett College. And I've lined up some speakers for that. If you have speakers, any of the members have speakers for that committee, if you'll get them to me, I believe Lori is confirming those speakers now. The other issue is the extension of the committee system in our report, and I believe Senate Research and House Research is working on that, and I believe we do have a letter, and it sounds like we will get confirmation to go past the December 1st deadline. And if you don't know, the committee members, we had a deadline on December 1st, and that puts a very hard, definitive deadline for research and the attorneys and everyone that's working on this. So we're asking for an extension of where it will be granted. So I have that letter, and I think you have that letter. I'll be glad to sign it today so that we can get it off and get it confirmed.
Thank you. Senator, yes, just a couple of more house cleaning, and then we'll kind of get to it. Let me introduce our other 2 members. Chuck Spahos, who's Executive Director of Prosecuting Attorneys Council. He's been in law enforcement all his life, an assistant DA, Solicitor General, bringing some real expertise from a law enforcement perspective. Thank you, Chuck, for being here. And Dr. Matthew Flynn, down on the far end, who is appointee from the Medical Association of Georgia. He's a neurologist in private practice and is providing some real expertise for some medical background. This is the second of our 5 hearings. As Senator Underwood said, the November 12th one, the October 1st one will be at Georgia Gwinnett College, where we'll focus on law enforcement. There is one change. The 4th one that was scheduled for October 22nd has been moved to November the 12th. That will still be at GRU in Augusta, and we'll focus on getting some input from the medical community, and as well as hearing about the GW pharmaceutical trials. So that'll move our last meeting to December 3rd at Georgia Capitol. You can find more information on the Georgia Medical Cannabis Study Committee Facebook page. For those that are here, have never been here before, to any of our hearings, this is our second one. There will not be any public testimony. All this testimony today will be from folks that we have already scheduled to speak for today. If you have a question or comment that you'd like to make and give to us, you're welcome to go to that Facebook page that I just mentioned, Georgia Medical Cannabis Study Committee, or you can send comments to my office or Senator Underwood's office, which you can find on the Georgia General Assembly website. We've had 1 hearing so far, very civilized, very orderly. We look forward to that again today. Before we get into that, we do want to acknowledge our staff that's here from Capitol. They're here helping us. We sure appreciate all that you've done for us and continue to, of course, make these meetings successful. let's get to it. This is, today we're going to hear testimony from families and citizens who have expressed either an interest in the medical cannabis issue, have either experience with medical cannabis for their child or for themselves, or are evaluating that as an option for a particular diagnosis. We will hear some very heart-wrenching stories today. This will be very emotional, so we'll all be respectful for folks who give testimony. For those that are giving testimony, I think I've chatted with each one of you. You will have 5 to 10 minutes to make a statement. Then we'll have some follow-up questions from the committee if they so desire that. You're welcome to share as much about your personal diagnosis and medical condition as you're comfortable with. You don't have to share or as limited amount. That's totally up to you. We will be respectful of the particular situation that each of you face, and we're grateful to have you. We do have 10 or 15, so we're going to try to stick to a strict schedule. So if you're going longer, I'm going to cut you off. And so I just want to be prepared for that. We will do it. Okay, we'll go to our first presenter, all the way Georgia native, moved to Colorado, Mr. Aaron Cleppinger. Aaron, you're here. Come forward. Just for the members of the committee, as he's coming forward too, we have 3 mics up here, so when we have questions, you'll need to ask for one of these mics. The 2 side ones are not on, so when you get them, you need to click them on. These 2 mics right here just for feed for the video that will go out while you're on as well. So, Mr. Cleppinger, we'd like to have you here.
Yes, thanks for having me. My wife and 3 children are back in Colorado, so thanks a lot for having me here. What would you do if you were told your loved one had a short time to live? Well, my 90-year-old grandmother was diagnosed with cancer, and here's what she said. Well, something's got to kill me. But a short time to live is different when the family member involved is a child. All we wanted was to give our son Hunter a better life. If you're a parent or grandparent, making the world a better place by raising a healthy, happy, and productive child is why we exist. Thank you. Technical. All that was stripped away from my family at the end of January 2006. We learned my son had a severe, difficult-to-treat seizure disorder. We were told that he would likely die sooner rather than later. All we wanted at that moment was to give Hunter a better life. So we did exactly what you would do. We worked with our doctor to try to find a treatment that worked. My son was 6 months old. This was the medicine, ACTH, that we injected into his leg twice per day. Instead of a quick solution, this medicine made him insane. Constantly screaming 24 hours a day, extreme insomnia, rapid weight gain, and no benefit whatsoever. But we stabbed our child with a needle full of poison twice a day because the doctors told us it could help. They didn't know. All they knew is that it worked for some other kids. Neurology is such an individualized medicine, and in many cases, doctors don't really know what causes the seizures. So we continued by adding one medicine after another, just guessing. Occasionally we removed medicines, but often we just added more. Nothing worked. Nearly all of them gave horrible side effects. The doctors were still just guessing. We were told that less than 1% of patients who failed 3 anti-seizure medicines would ever find a subsequent drug that fixed their problem. Our doctor told us we could try a drug that we personally import from India that wasn't FDA approved. We could try a medicine that could cause permanent partial blindness. None of these options made sense to us, but this was all the doctor had left. All we wanted was to give Hunter a better life. We tried over a dozen different treatments, including numerous FDA-approved drug combinations and a horrible all-fat diet that gave Hunter a helicopter trip to the emergency room. Can you cue the video, please? Sorry, I had technical difficulties. Can you turn off the audio, please? The physical impacts were obvious, and his progress in school was going nowhere. If you can. We didn't even know what was causing the seizures in Hunter, and here we were throwing medicine after medicine at a problem we couldn't clearly define. We knew science didn't have all the answers, but we knew one thing: we'd do whatever it takes to help give Hunter a better life. So I get a call from Dawn's dad, my father-in-law, Mr. Fix-It. In case you have one of these in your family, you know who I mean. Not only does he work on my house, and teach me about football and fishing and how to be a better person, but he calls to let me know how I can give Hunter a better life. He tells me about a CNN special where a little Colorado girl has gone from 300 seizures a week to 1 every 2 weeks. My immediate reaction was probably like yours. You've got to be kidding me. From smoking a joint? No way. He said, no, the child's not smoking anything. It's an oil they take with their food. Oh. If solving my son's seizures was so simple, then why hadn't I heard about this? Can I just go down to my local drug dealer and get this for my kid? I mean, all the other medicines he's taken have gotten high, and none of them even worked. There had to be more to this story. So I did some research. It turns out, just like any other medicine, there's a range of results. None of the patients I spoke with had side effects from the cannabis or knew of any. We knew many of his FDA-approved medicines could cause horrible consequences to Hunter's frail body or even death. From 100% seizure reduction to some down as little as 50%, the largest group were 90 to 100% seizure reduction. Many of those patients also had major cognitive gains on the cannabis oil. We figured we had nothing to lose. Our son had been given a few years to live. The oil my son takes is grown organically, extracted from the cannabis plant, tested for contaminants and active ingredients by an independent lab, labeled and put into a medicine bottle with an olive oil carrier. Georgia had none of this. So there was no decision to make. We had to move to Colorado. My wife was born and raised in Cobb County. I lived in Georgia 2/3 of my life. We both graduated from the University of Georgia. Our families are here. Georgia is our home. But we had to try to give Hunter a better life. Here's Hunter's progress on the oil. Massive improvement in his seizures, and the duration of his seizures is tremendously better as well. As you can see, he started at the very end of November on the oil, and it's just gotten, except for maybe one blip here and there, massively better. Video, please. This is his seizures now. I don't even know for sure if these are seizures. So I asked his neurologist on a recent visit. Her answer, and she was trained at an Ivy League school, I wouldn't know for sure without seeing them on an EEG and a brain electrical scan. We're still waiting for his test results on that. Most of his seizures are this short, and occasionally he'll have one lasting up to 4 minutes. The longest one we've seen from November 2013 until now was 3.5 minutes long, and he was having up to 27 minutes prior to moving from Georgia. In Georgia, we got an average of 1 to 2 EMS calls every month, saying the school was calling EMS for a seizure that lasted beyond 5 to 10 minutes. In Colorado, not one in 4 months of school. His condition profoundly affected our quality of life as well. Imagine, you can't work because you are worried every single day you are going to have to race an ambulance to your child's school. Oh, and about school. In Colorado, his therapists and teachers have this to say about his recent progress. Increased awareness of his environment, increased eye contact with others, tracking items visually, much more calm and happy, less agitated with therapy and tolerates movement better. Increased purposeful arm movement to interact with and explore his environment. Laughing in response to a cause and effect toy. By the grace of God, we have found a solution, a natural supplement that is helping give Hunter a better life. It can be hard to look at something that is so painful as some of these children's lives are. Please take a look. Here's Hunter's friend Ezra. The top picture, first of all, he has mitochondrial disease, seizures, and pain. The top picture is him on morphine and codeine for 3 months, screaming constantly, and the FDA-approved medicines did not work. The bottom picture is after his mother put him on a specially tailored cannabis oil. That was the effect. Calm, comfortable. This was his mother trying to put him in the car, on the left and on the top right. Her putting him in the car to take him somewhere prior to the cannabis oil. This was on morphine and codeine for 3 months. He was just screaming nonstop. In the bottom right, after cannabis oil. The FDA approved medicines did not work for him. I'm asking you to throw out your preconceived notions like I had to. I'm asking for you to look at the facts. I'm asking for you to look at the kids of all different medical conditions that can be helped by cannabis. You have an opportunity. You can give Jordans a better life. Thank you.
You'll hang tight for a minute. There may be some questions from the
Okay,
committee.
yeah, that's fine.
From the committee. Any questions for Mr. Tucker?
And if you have any afterwards, I'll be glad for you to send them to me through one of the chair.
So just to be clear, you've been in Colorado since November.
Yes, sir.
Chart and graph showed dramatic decreases in your seizure activity. Now, are you still on any of the FDA-approved drugs?
He actually, so here's the funny part. We weren't entirely sure because we kept adding medicines, and it was such a cocktail of drugs that we weren't even sure if they were actually working. So we decided actually long before we even knew about this CNN story, that we were going to take him off the medicines and see how it went, because we didn't know. It wasn't a scientific enough process for us to know if one worked, if another didn't, It was such a cocktail of medicines that we had taken him off long before we moved to Colorado. So he's on no other medicines, only the cannabis oil.
Sir, I'm Matt Gwynn. I'm a neurologist. I actually have a son with developmental disabilities. My wife is active in the AATD organization here in Georgia. And my son developed epilepsy at 2.5 and regressed. Does your son have Lennox-Gastaut?
Undiagnosed, so we don't have a diagnosis.
So I just wanted to know a little bit about that, if that's okay, because I do come from a background where I've dealt with this all my life as well. He's 25 and doing much better. But my question for, I guess, everyone who comes up here is going to be the same. Would you all be willing to enroll your child or yourself or your loved one in a clinical randomized controlled study to study this to see whether it truly is effective against placebo? And if so, what would be the ground rules that you would want to have?
Sure, so I'd have to probably think about the ground rules, but certainly myself and many of the other parents that are affected by this issue, we would welcome more research on this. In fact, it's interesting the difference between many of the prescribed pharmaceutical medicines as far as especially cognition and some others. We've seen major changes from our son, and we don't know. The only change has been the cannabis oil. And this is not just our son, but numerous other children. So we would absolutely love to know why. I would love to know why my son's having seizures too. I'd really like to treat the root cause other than just the symptoms. But as far as the change in symptoms, we're seeing a massive improvement in the seizures as well as cognition and happiness and awareness. And we would love that.
hard to say, ask in retrospect, because you're already on the medication, and I understand that. But so you would be willing, if he never had been taking it before, you think that if that were available, would be willing to go?
Oh, I think a lot of parents in Georgia would be happy to do that, yes.
Senator Thompson, if you grab the mic.
I guess, as I remember from the last hearing, I remember some questions about the placebo effect issue. If you don't mind sharing, I guess, where developmentally is your child?
So about a 1-month-old level is what many of the doctors have told us. I mean, he doesn't use his hands purposely. He can't sit up,
So
can't hold his head up.
It's not really possible for him to know he's getting cannabinoid oil. Or
No.
So there's no.
Well, he wouldn't be able to
ability
communicate it.
have a placebo effect because he doesn't know what's. I mean, is that a fair statement? Does he know?
I mean, I don't know the specifics behind the placebo effect, if you will, but
even
all
if
I
you
can,
know you're taking
all I,
medicine, even if it's a sugar pill,
yeah.
it can sometimes make you feel better because you just think.
Yeah, he wouldn't be able to express that at all. You know,
I'm just concerned that if we're talking about people at this developmental stage, that we not get in the weeds of what the placebo effect is, because that deals with people with cognitive abilities above 1 month and older.
Yeah, no offense taken. I understand.
Any other questions? Representative Craig. We'll make sure that's on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Clevenger, thank you.
Yes.
Very much for coming out. I know your family's in Colorado, so being here today.
Thanks for having me.
I just want to ask, you have a pediatrician in Colorado, don't you?
Yes, a pediatrician, a neurologist for his movement disorder, and a neurologist for his seizure disorder, as well as a doctor who specializes more in the cannabis medicine and knowing how to dose and things like that.
My question is overall health, your son's overall health, Georgia, compared to his overall health?
So his overall health has always been, except for the seizures and development, he's got a movement disorder as well. As far as having to go to the hospital or being on a respirator or any of those type of things, he doesn't have any of those, which is why it's even more astounding that we've never found a cause. But his overall health there, as far as those type of things, is fairly similar. The one big thing that we've been surprised at is, sorry for the candidness and graphicness here, but he was on a laxative substance for every day for the past 8 years prior to us moving and being on cannabis oil, and he's off that completely. We actually tried numerous times to take him off of that medicine, and it was a complete failure. He was screaming and horribly miserable. So the one thing we did notice was that was surprising to us. But as far as his overall health, the main things we've seen are cognitive, more awareness and happiness and calmness and all that kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so a lot of the seizure medicines put you into kind of like there's one called Topamax, for example. The nickname is Dopamax because it turns you into a zombie. So a lot of the seizure medicines unfortunately make you sleepy, or you can't even function. But we see none of that with the cannabis oil. Yes, thank you.
Mr. Clevenger, thank you.
Yes.
I've had the chance to meet your son and grown to love him and your family. Appreciate the courage you've shown in stepping into this issue. Just one final question: to pass this thing in Georgia, we can get the Clevenger family back home?
Yes. In fact, you're going to get 3/5 of the Clevenger family back home in January. So the pressure's on. I mean, we want to come home. We still own a house here. Our whole family's here, like I mentioned, and we're rooting on everybody. So yes.
Thank you for being here.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Okay. Let me before our next presenter real quick too. I think we have a couple of our colleagues here. I know I saw Representative Patty Bentley here. Yeah, he's here. Glad to have you here. And I know Robert Dickey was coming. I don't know if he's here. Any other legislators or senators? James Beverly from here. Stand up. Representative James Beverly's here. Glad to have you here. Thank you for being here. Let me, if I can, Co-Chair, I'm going to take just a privilege to do, and I'm sorry I did not do this. Many of you know, a lot of these families have moved to Colorado and have seen success. We did have one Georgia family whose mom and daughter moved out to Colorado early in the summer. Cheryl Sumlin and her daughter Trinity. And Trinity, 11-year-old little girl, I think we've got her picture up there. This is her. Passed away last Friday. And from causes related to some natural causes for her stuff. So anyway, if we could just take just a moment of silence, if that's okay. Just a moment of silence to pray for this family and just a moment. Thank you very much. I appreciate the tolerance to do that. She was a very special girl. Chris Clark will be our next presenter. Mr. Clevenger did good. You went a little over, so Mr. Clark, we're going to get you piece back on track. You've got a pretty interesting story, so we'll look forward to hearing your testimony.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me. I'm Sergeant Chris Clark. I'm a 26-and-a-half-year veteran with the Atlanta Police Department. I've served in various capacities during that 26-year career, including 3 to 4 years as an undercover narcotics officer. And currently I'm in charge of all the drug evidence for the city of Atlanta. So I have a diverse background when it comes to narcotics. 10 years ago, my son started having seizures. He was born having seizures. He was diagnosed with Lennox-Gastaut syndrome, and he's had hundreds of seizures a day for his whole life. We were in a critical time frame from about 7 to 12 years of age, as told by our neurologist, that we could lose Caden, that he was going to expire. So after trying, let me just give you a little background, after trying 20 different combinations of FDA-approved drugs that had horrific side effects, none of those worked. Caden actually stopped walking during one of those periods, and my wife literally retrained him how to walk and would tie his legs to hers and walk with him every day to teach him to walk again. So those drugs are some of the most powerful medications that are manufactured, period. We tried 2 diets that mimic starvation. We actually had to starve our son. He was still hungry, but we couldn't feed him. We had little effect with that. Didn't really work. Some reduction in seizures, but still having upwards of 100 seizures a day. So our neurologist said, look, we're running out of options here, so we've got to look at surgery. They thought that they could pinpoint a particular area in his brain that they could cut out, and it would reduce the seizure activity. So after prayer and hard thought, we finally decided to have the surgery. He had 2 brain surgeries. One, he removed part of his right frontal lobe. The other was a corpus callosotomy, which split the hemispheres of the brain. Well, after having the surgeries, that didn't work either. It did have some success with a type of seizure that's called drop attacks. It did stop him from slamming violently into the ground as he walked. But he was still having hundreds of seizures a day. And at this point, actually, some of them became more violent. We were out of options at this point with Caden after that surgery. And we were basically giving Caden the best quality of life that we could actually give him. We were just living out his days, waiting for that seizure that was ultimately going to take his life. One day during August of last year, my wife approached me and said, look, I saw this special with Sanjay Gupta about a medication that they were giving a little girl named Charlotte out in Colorado. When she approached me with that and initially told me that it was marijuana, obviously I was very reluctant after spending 26 years on the opposite side of the fence here, arresting people for that same product, okay? So I was not right off. I was like, no way, I'm not doing that. Well, my persistent wife, she stayed persistent with me. She said, look, you really need to take a look at this. So I investigated. I did my own investigation as Mr. Clevenger did. and I found out that this little girl named Charlotte was similar to Caden with the issues she was having with seizures, and all of a sudden she had become almost seizure-free, a significant reduction. So after looking into that, I said, look, we have to go to Colorado. We're gonna do it. I'm on board. I'm with you. So November of last year, we packed a truck, moved 1,500 miles out west, and we waited about 5 months or so before we were able to get the product. But we moved out to Colorado so Caden could have a second chance, or at least have some hope. For the first time in 10 years of his life, we had hope. We had hope that something might help him out. I'm not out there. I'm currently still working in the city of Atlanta. My wife and 2 kids are out there in Colorado. I had to stay here because we had to have an income. Somebody had to feed the bulldog, so to speak, while we were out there. I just got a contract on my house because I'm having to sell my house. Thank goodness my house got a contract within 8 days. I'm selling it at the end of the month. I'm a cop, don't make a lot of money, so something had to go. Something had to give. But we're willing to do that based on Caden. Well, the good news is, let me give you the good news now that I gave you all that bad news and Caden's diagnosis, is that he's about 85% seizure-free. So the medication or the treatment that he was given actually worked. We just celebrated Caden's birthday, September 2nd, and he's now 11 years old. And we had one heck of a celebration because this is the first time in his whole life that he hadn't had hundreds of seizures. The record so far for these seizures is 11 days without seizures. Now, this is a kid that's had upwards of hundreds of seizures every day of his life since he was born. From the moment the first picture of him was taken as a baby, that baby picture is of him having a seizure. For the first time, he's gone 11 days, and he has other periods where he goes 5 days, 6 days. So the seizure reduction is just absolutely incredible. Cognitively, he's doing a lot better. Same thing that Mr. Kleppinger said. He has eye contact with his mother and I now that we never had before. He remembers where he puts toys and can go back and pick up that toy. Never did that before. He's happy. He's having a great life now. None of that existed prior to CBD oil, which Caden's on Charlotte's Web oil there in Colorado. We're still weaning prescription medications, and he's having these reduction in seizures while we're still titrating all these medications. We're bringing them down. These hard FDA drugs, we're bringing them down, and he's still having seizure control, which is unfounded in my opinion. I want to speak to the placebo effect just a minute. There is no placebo effect here. Caden was having 100 seizures a day where he would wrench his body in pain, bend backwards, just as the little child that was up there a few minutes ago was wrenching over. That's not just a seizure. That's pain. That child is hurting. Caden would wrench in all kinds of different, unimaginable positions. He's not doing that now. He's not doing that now. There is no placebo effect associated with this CBD oil. Is he completely healed? To be fairly honest, no, he's not completely healed. No. But he's not having 100 seizures a day, and he's going without multiple days without having any seizures at all. And what this CBD oil is doing is not only allowing him to have seizure-free days, his body is finally healing. His mind and his body are finally healing. Lastly, let me clarify some language. Now, I'm not talking about recreational marijuana here. I'm not talking about legalizing recreational marijuana. And I also want to point out that we're not talking specifically about marijuana. We're talking about therapeutic hemp. Therapeutic hemp. What qualifies this as therapeutic hemp? Well, I want you to hear this number. 0.3% of THC qualifies as therapeutic hemp. Not 3%, 0.3% qualifies as therapeutic THC. Just a little bit of background. I want to give some stats real quick. 1 in 50 children under 18 have epilepsy. 1 in 3 children who have developmental disorders will develop some type of seizure activity at some point in their life. In Georgia, children are dying. Not everyone can pick up and move to Colorado as we did. Some of the kids are too sick to travel. Some of it is for economic reasons. Whatever the reasons, not everybody can pick up and travel. I'm not talking about giving this CBD oil to healthy kids. I'm talking about kids that are dying. We're talking about kids that do not have a great outlook on their life and are just frankly expected to die at some point. Their expiration date. They have an expiration date. These are not healthy children that we're speaking of. Meanwhile, life-changing treatment and an option is there for these parents and these children. The legislators of this state did the right thing last year. They passed HB 885, or I think it was adopted at that point to 2-something. I don't recall. But the bottom line is both the House and the Senate passed it before it was held up. They did the right thing because they heard these parents. They saw these kids that were experiencing a living hell every single day. I've given 26 years of my life to the city of Atlanta and serving the people of the state of Georgia. And I believe in all the legislators up here. I believe in Georgia. And I believe that we'll get this right in 2015. I do believe that. Children are dying. And you all recognize that. And they're out of time. We are out of time. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Any questions for Captain Clark?
Sergeant.
Yes, Dr. Wayne.
Thank you so much for that testimony. It's wonderful. I want to say that I'm on one side here. I want something that works for my work, would work for my child, for his children, future children, grandchildren. So please understand that. Concerning placebo effect, I've not talked about the children, of course. It's the observation in epilepsy. As you probably know, many people interpret seizures. I'm not saying you are. Interpret seizures the way they aren't. Underinterpret them the way they are. So there's an observation bias in almost every endeavor we do with epilepsy studies. That's why it's so difficult, so important to prove, in my opinion, the necessity that this stuff works for the generations to come. And you all have amazing, great anecdotes. They're wonderful and they're very valuable. And this is a form that we will almost not see anywhere else. So I'd love to get a little bit more information if I could, so that we can have it down the table so that you can make anything more about it. When you gave your child this cannabinol, cannabidiol oil, did you start at a low dose and work up, or did you start at a standard dose? Or did you taper such as one of the started example did?
Yeah, we started with a very low dose. In fact, we're not even maxed out to what the doctors have given the kind of the maximum level at this point. We're still far from that.
And about what time in the process did you start seeing a decrease in the number of seizures?
It was after about 2 days.
In 2 days, on a very, very tiny dose.
Yep.
Of some medication. So
Yep.
one might infer that very tiny doses therapeutic, or one might infer other things too, but that's one of the things. And so that's when you started seeing a dramatic decrease in the akinetic seizures, the proptotics, and the tonic seizures, the ones where you're stressed out.
Correct, because obviously with Lennox-Gastaut, he has a different variety of seizures. All that reduced. All that was a reduction.
Did it continue to get lower as you went up?
The seizure activity after a couple of days, he went 6 days without any seizures at all, and then he had a seizure, and then he went another 5 days without any, and then had a seizure, and then we upped the dose in between there, and then he's gone as much as 11 days without a seizure at all. And I can assure you that my wife and I are very, as most of these parents are very educated about seizures and when our child is having a seizure. And my neurologist that lives here in Georgia can attest that we're very sharp when it comes to that, and he relies, just as you probably do, on a lot of what the parents tell you when you go into them for treatment. Well, right at the time that we moved out there, Caden was like, I believe he was like 140th patient, somewhere around there. And at that time, there was 1,000 children on the waiting list. Now that waiting list is upwards of 10,000. Actually, last I heard it was about 12,000. That's how many people are trying to flock to Colorado to get help. Now, fortunately, a lot of the states around this area have passed some type of legislation. But I know Georgia's not going to fail me this year, and I'll be able to move my wife and kids back.
So you're not moving yourself?
No, I can't. I have to. This is my job for 26 years. I can't pick up and leave, and I've got to have that income to support them out there.
Good, I understand. I put your family back.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Any other questions for me?
Mr. Chairman? Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
You can go ahead. You might have the same question.
Okay. Thank you, Sergeant Clark, for being here. And we appreciate your testimony here and otherwise, other meetings.
Thank you, sir.
How old is Kate now?
Caden is 11 years old now.
And when you initially went to Colorado, was there a doctor or a pediatrician involved from the very onset when you started taking the treatment?
Yes, sir. We got hooked up with physicians as soon as we got out there.
And how did you locate or find those physicians?
Well, fortunately, through the realm of Caring, which is the organization that we went through for Charlotte's Web CBD oil, guided us along that process. Is there a helpful organization out there?
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I think my questions are along those same lines. And if you don't want to answer them, that's fine. When you were in Georgia, were you on a Katie Beckett waiver? You worked for the city of Atlanta, so you had city of Atlanta insurance. Were you on a
Correct.
Katie Beckett waiver?
No, ma'am.
His insurance was completely city of Atlanta,
Correct.
and you never applied for a Katie Beckett?
No, ma'am. Never did. I've always done everything on my own, including that move out there. That's the way I was raised.
So did the city of Atlanta insurance cover all of his coverage?
Yeah, they covered the brain surgery and all that. Now, there's certain things, obviously, that you've got to kick in with, like, another example, he was in a wheelchair while he was here, and that cost me about $800 out of pocket, because they only pay a percentage of that. But fortunately now he's up and walking around, and we rarely need the wheelchair anymore, along with a helmet. I mean, he used to wear a helmet here as well, and now he's not wearing a helmet anymore.
So you didn't have to pay like 20%? I mean, the city of Atlanta insurance must be very good. If you had 100%.
It's not bad. It's Blue Cross Blue Shield. I guess I'll give them a little advertisement here.
Putting your life on the line.
Be careful, be careful.
So I guess my question is, when you went to Colorado, is your insurance still covering him?
Yes.
It covers the physicians?
Yes.
And
You have in-state and out-of-state providers,
right.
or in-network and out-of-network,
So
and they're considered out-of-network providers.
So are you paying like 20% now?
Yeah, it's a little bit higher.
Yeah. So when you went there and you said the realm of curing was, you went into a system.
Mm-hmm.
So is he seeing, you said physicians, but you didn't say neurologists.
He's seeing a pediatrician, a neurologist, and a marijuana physician that's out there as well, and a psychiatrist, actually.
What's a marijuana physician?
Well, they help calculate the dosages of the CBD oil. They actually specialize in looking at that oil and coming up with appropriate dosage per weight of the child, and give you like a structured guidance. Actually, there's a spreadsheet that you can pull up online and look at the different weights and calculations.
So is he employed by the pharmaceutical company, or who?
No,
who
it's
is that physician?
it's an independent physician, as far as I know, because remember, Colorado is a legalized state for all types of marijuana. It's recreational as well.
But what kind of physician is he? You said a marijuana physician.
Well, I'm
just
assuming
trying to
she
figure
has a PhD, so we call her a doctor, but she's a marijuana physician. She specializes in that. I don't know if there's another term. I don't know if there's a. There you go. I didn't know if there was another terminology for it, but that's what she specializes in. There you go, Dr. Getty.
pathologist?
Yeah, Dr. Getty.
So a pathologist is giving the medication?
No, that's not where you get the medication,
But I mean, they're overseeing the care?
along with the pediatrician and a neurologist.
So, I was just trying to figure out, and maybe someone else can answer this question about Medicaid, because I know a lot of these kids are on Medicaid. And I just wondered if when you went to Colorado, if the coverage transferred. But you wouldn't know that because you're not involved. You have private insurance.
Correct.
So, I'll,
If you become a patient, a Medicaid patient in Colorado, the child actually has to be a resident of Colorado to receive the medicine, and therefore the Medicaid actually has to start completely over in Colorado. You have to literally apply as if you're a brand new patient in Colorado to get on the Colorado Medicaid system.
so does Medicaid cover the cost of the oil? I'll answer that.
I don't know the details, I'm sorry.
So I guess my question is, does Medicaid cover the cost
That's,
of an FDA unapproved drug?
Mr. Clerk, do you know the answer to that? Does
Are you
Medicaid cover-
asking if CBD oil is covered under the medication? No, that comes out of my pocket.
Is that what you're asking?
Unfortunately, it
Because
comes
Blue
out of my
Cross Blue
pocket.
Shield doesn't pay for it either, right?
No, they don't pay. They do
how
not
much are
pay
you
for
paying?
that. But that's not what you specifically asked to begin with. You were asking about the physicians themselves.
How much does it cost?
It's around $300 a month.
CBD oil.
Based on weight.
It's all
For-
based on weight.
For the oil?
Correct.
Okay. Does it cost to belong to the realm of caring and be
No.
a patient in that system?
Nonprofit.
It's a nonprofit?
Any other questions? Yeah, real quick. Mr. Spade.
Dr. Clark, at some point, I know we're short on time, I would be interested in your perspective specifically to the board. At some point, we've got to discuss what this potential manufacturing process is going to look like, how that would work in Georgia compared to what some other states have done.
Sure.
Obviously, there's some real concern about going to the extent that Colorado has done and some states that there's some problem with that as well. So if I could follow up with you, what I would really like your input as to your observations out there, and maybe some way to do it. Because as I said, last meeting, the prosecutors were generally supportive of this product getting to people who need it better than the state. But the devil's always
Sure.
in detail about how we get that product available.
Awesome. I would love to speak with you. I'm sure Mr. Peake can hook us up.
Want to give a 60-second response to that?
I think we'll just talk. We'll speak at another time about that in the interest of time.
Eddie would have that. Representative Graham?
Just really quickly, because it was mentioned during Sergeant Clark's testimony, and number one, we do want to get quality candidates.
Thank you.
To the question of proof, I don't think there's any, when I hear things like to prove whether or not this works, I give you 1,000 examples of proof. I want the research to happen, be it a double-blind placebo, be it scientific, case study, whatnot, to prove how it's working, why it's working. I have no question about whether or not it's working. I believe it. I mean, I know that it's working. That's on the record display. The research and the study and stuff like that. I'm very interested in figuring out how it's working. Fascinating on how it's working. I want to know how. But I think to answer the question of whether or not it's prove whether or not it's working, I think it's a good point that everybody discussed at this table. Proves that it's working.
Well, I think something that's very exciting is that University of Colorado has. They're going to do trials on the CBD oil. So they're actually doing some clinical trials.
Sergeant Clark, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate,
All right.
We're going to try and bring your family home.
All right. Thank you.
So we're running a little behind, and so we're going to keep moving forward. Next, presenter, Ms. Katie Crosby. Mike, come on up. I know Yvonne, I heard, is going to come up and sit with you as well, too. Or Yvonne and Dan.
thank you guys so much for your time and for this opportunity. And I would ask if you would bear with me. I am in a lot of pain and it's hard to concentrate. But if you would listen to these, is the microphone on? Can you hear me?
You go at your own pace.
Okay, I was just making sure everything's on.
They can't hear.
They can't hear me.
You just get close to the microphone.
Severe pain, 24/7, around the clock, excruciating, debilitating, feel like you're going crazy, never-ending pain. That is my life. It is my constant shadow, my wakeful nightmare, my inescapable enemy. When I was 15, I experienced chronic pain for the first time through sports injuries. I went to countless doctors, one who said if he could put me in a body cast for a year, that might could fix me, and one who said that I would always be in excruciating pain. Imagine if your child was told that at 15 years old. Thankfully, I found a specialized physical therapist who I worked tirelessly under, who, after 2 years, I was his poster child, and he released me August of 2007 and said if I could go a year with no accidents and no falls to help strengthen my lower back, then I would be pain-free. 6 weeks later, I was in a horrific car accident that we were nearly T-boned. I was knocked out instantly. I was released from, we spun 100 feet. I was released with concussion and severe whiplash syndrome. After an MRI and neurological testing, they found a lesion on my brain and brain damage affecting the areas of recall, concentration, and motor sensory skills. And this also began my long, arduous journey of chronic pain. I thought I knew what it was like in high school until I met it again a couple years later. Throw at me every test, every doctor, every procedure that you can, and I've tried it. I've exhausted every avenue here in Georgia to help my pain. And I'm telling you all of these different things to let you know what I have tried. MRIs, CAT scans, 3 nerve blocks, radio frequency ablations where they burn the nerves on each side of your back, chiropractors, physical therapists, massage therapists, acupuncturists. I spent a summer in Arizona seeing a specialized doctor rehabbing 5 days a week, 3 hours a day. I've been at the Shepherd Center and had sphenopalatine blocks. I spent 2 weeks at the Mayo Clinic where I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia and central sensitivity syndrome, where your nervous system is on high alert and things such as light, sound, movement, etc. can spur severe pain and migraines. In total, I've been diagnosed with chronic pain syndrome, fibromyalgia, migraines with aura, central sensitivity syndrome, insomnia, and chronic fatigue syndrome. I know even after this long list, I am leaving out doctors and procedures that I've tried. Like everything else I've done in my life, I've given 100% to be a grade A student. When it comes to eliminating pain, unfortunately, grades do not count when it comes to this monster. I've spent over $100,000 since my freshman year of college to get relief, and look where I sit right now. After all of this, I've been diagnosed with medical PTSD, which basically means the institution I rely on, the medical field, which is supposed to be a fortress for healing, has failed me and has made me feel helpless in the process. I sought out to manage the pain, and the pain has begun to manage me. Friends and family have seen me turn from a vibrant, passionate, motivator, lover of life, to a shell who is now confined mostly to my upstairs den, where the curtains are drawn tight to escape any light that could trigger pain. I turned 26 in 5 days, and I am mostly dependent on my parents to drive me and to cook for me. I'm no longer able to attend church. Most days I cannot even read because it disrupts my concentration and comprehension. I'm forgetful. I have a hard time recalling words that most people don't think twice about. Sometimes I cannot even form a thought. Do you guys enjoy going to football games, going out to dinner with friends, other concerts, entertainment events? I do too, but I can't. You might see me now wearing a cute dress that I haven't worn, and I can't remember how long, and I might look fine to you on the outside, but on the inside my body is screaming with pain. Coming to testify today, it will cause me more pain today and the days to come, but it's worth it because it is a cause that is valiantly worth fighting for. A stigma has been associated with people with chronic pain because of painkillers. Yet that is the only thing that sometimes provides brief relief, and is something doctors invented, not ourselves. I stand with around 20% of American adults who are substantially impaired with chronic pain, and between 10 to 15% who face substantial work disability. People like me, even with our vast numbers and our impairments, feel invisible, helpless, misunderstood, and unheard. So in describing pain, I'm not talking about a headache every once in a while or some minor aches and pains. To put things in perspective, there are more people with chronic pain, severe chronic pain, than those with diabetes, heart disease, and cancer put together. My story is not an outlier. It resembles millions across this country and thousands within this state. And with the unfortunate stigma surrounding chronic pain, many people choose to see me as someone vulnerable to addiction because of narcotics, rather than someone who is immensely suffering and has no viable solution. Even doctors who want to push back surgery, 74% of back surgeries fail and cause the patient more pain. Another astounding statistic, that back pain is the leading cause of disability of American people under the age of 45. When discussing the effectiveness of medications to address chronic pain, only 50% of people say that narcotics are even effective. In a recent study done by the National Pain Foundation related to fibromyalgia, amongst a group surveyed with the leading medications that help, only 8% said that Cymbalta was effective. 10% said that Lyrica and Savella were very effective. Compare that to medical cannabis, where 62% of that group said it was very effective, while only 5% said that it did not help at all. With the failings of the medical community to adequately address and help people like me, we need to look at a new war, and that's the war of pain management, because nothing is working. The side effects of the drugs used to supposedly help people like me include seizures, nausea, blurred vision, and even death, just to name a few. But there is still a powerful solution, and that is cannabis oil. This oil is natural, has no side effects, and cannot get you high. Many states have gone before Georgia to pass chronic pain as a diagnosis, states representing both historically blue or red, Democrat or Republican. People across this nation are seeing the powerful effects that cannabis oil is having on people with chronic pain. Inflammation is the body's natural reaction to pain, and research shows that cannabis oil is 20 times higher as an anti-inflammatory than aspirin. Colorado and Oregon, two states that have a large medical cannabis program, at least 94% of their patients that are seeking medical cannabis, their qualifying diagnosis is chronic pain. Research even shows that narcotic overdoses have decreased by 25% in just 2 years in states that have implemented medical cannabis. But please do not confuse getting high with pain management. Don't mix issues of abuse of narcotics with what we're talking about here. Cannabis oil is one form of pain management that has no appeal to the recreational drug users because cannabis oil cannot get you high. Recreational drug users who abuse narcotics to get high have given chronic pain sufferers a bad stigma. But with this bill, you're not turning people into addicts. You're addressing the dignity of pain sufferers. The patient's desired outcome is to get relief from the pain, not to become a criminal, and not to become high. Medical cannabis is working for people like me, who suffer daily with severe pain. One woman said that she was trapped in her bedroom with severe pain for 15 years. After getting on medical cannabis, she says she feels like she has her life back and it's all pharmaceutical drugs. Another tragic story in the news has been about a boy who suffered a traumatic brain injury, and his mother was afraid he was going to kill himself because his headaches were so bad. They moved to Colorado, got the oil. After one dose, he felt like he was back to normal. They brought the oil back to the state where it was illegal, their home state, and now that mother is facing prosecutional charges, criminal charges, because she gave her child the oil, and all she wanted was to have her son back and alive. Make no mistake, with the failure to pass this bill last year and with its upcoming proposal in January, the nation's eyes are on us. They're on Georgia. And I'm asking you to set aside policies that have nothing to do with science or law, but are based on fear, ignorance, and prejudice. If you choose not to place chronic pain on this bill, you're leaving out the largest represented sufferers in our state. You have a chance to go with the nation's appeal, to go with the Georgians' appeal. I've heard from people, from liberals to conservative, from all ages, who are all for this for chronic pain. It is overwhelming to me. And you as legislators were elected by constituents like me to help people. And you have a great responsibility resting on your shoulders. And I hope that your vote in informing this bill will be one of compassion and concern for all of your constituents, and that Georgia will be seen as a state that champions all people who are severely hurting to feel helpless as to which direction to go to find relief. What if you had a family member who you saw suffering in their darkest moments every hour of the day, and they had tried everything to get their life back and nothing has worked? How would you respond? What would you do? How would you vote? If this is not passed, I will possibly be forced to leave my family, my support group, to become another medical refugee, to seek the relief that I need. And I love Georgia. I love my home state. And I would like to think that our great state wants its residents to have the freedom to find relief here at home. And let me re-emphasize relief that is natural, has no side effects, and cannot get you high. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Crosby. Appreciate it very much. Any questions from the committee? Jim?
If you don't mind. Thank you for being here today, and heart goes out to you and your family.
Thank you.
I know that for mom and dad it's very difficult, and for you it's difficult. When you mentioned in your statement about a mother that was being prosecuted, where was that?
I don't have the best memory. I believe it's in Minnesota. Yeah.
And have you had experience with oil and what was?
No, because it's not legal here in Georgia. I've not had the cannabis oil. I've not smoked marijuana because I am a law-abiding citizen.
Thank you again for being here. Appreciate it.
Ms. Crosby? I've known you a long time. I've been proud of you. Standing up, sitting down, speaking. That's your story. So I'm very proud of you. And I got faith.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay,
Thank you. Thank you.
okay, our next presenter, Mr. David Garrison.
Mr. Chairman, while Mr. Garrison is coming up, can we have someone with audio?
Yeah, Brent, do you
Check
got
our
somebody you
equipment.
check on that? Yeah, check. Is David here? Mr. Garrison? I know he was here. We'll come back to here. Sebastian Cott. Sebastian Cott?
Sure sounds like it.
Sounds like it's on now. You just stand there and hold it for him.
Scott, you'll come on. Continue to encourage our listeners. I know this is emotional testimony, and we're trying to be conscious of the time for everybody, get everybody speaking here, so we appreciate that, and I understand you flew into Colorado as well.
Yes.
Go ahead here, report your
Thank you. I guess it's supposed to be a picture or something in the background.
yes, I think he's coming from audio. Sebastian Cott.
KSU.
I think we got a picture of his,
Number 8.
Brent, we did. Brent, you got a gentleman. There you go. You got a picture of him. What's yours?
Thank you. Thank you very much. So my name is Sebastian, and I want to talk to you today about my son Jagger. Now, I'm originally from France. I do have a funny accent, and I do tend to speak really fast, which I'm sure is probably good right now, but you might not understand me. So if I need to slow down, just let me know. My little boy Jagger, you can see in the picture, is going to turn 4 on Sunday. We were told by many doctors that he will never see that age. We were told that if he make it to 2, we should be very lucky. But now he's going to be 4, and he continues to bless us every day. Jagger was diagnosed with mitochondrial disease at age 1. Tests confirmed that he has Lee's disease, which is the most progressive and fatal form of mitochondrial disease, with a very short life expectancy if diagnosed before the age of 2. The diagnosis came after months and months of struggling with feeding, vomiting, agitation, screaming. Jagger was absolutely miserable. We went to see so many doctors and specialists. Nobody knew what was going on with him. We couldn't find what was wrong with him. We could not comfort him. It was so difficult as a dad, as a first-time dad, not to be able to help your son, to watch him scream 20-plus hours a day without being able to do anything to help him. He was not gaining weight. He had so many issues. During one of our hospital stay, Jagger screamed so much that he actually screamed himself to exhaustion, and he stopped breathing. He died right there in the hospital, and if it wasn't for the amazing team of doctors that got him back, Jagger would not be with us today. He was placed on the ventilator for 4 days. The fourth
the 4 worst day of my life and my wife's life. He was able to get off the ventilator, and we were discharged in hospice care, with a number of a funeral home telling us to call and make arrangements for his soon-to-be passing. Hospice has been helping, but only semi-successfully with his pain and with his disease. Myocardial disease is very tricky. He has no cure, no treatment, and most of the time no hope. Mostly because even patients with the same mitochondrial disorder and the same genetic mutation have different symptoms. Nobody knows why. We're still in the very beginning stage of research for mitochondrial disorders. Jagger suffers from severe muscle pain, stomach pain, and despite all the FDA-approved medication he's taking, he still suffers every day. As he gets a little bit older, all of a sudden a new symptom arrives: seizures. When will that end? Why does Jagger need to have one more issue? Can he really handle it? So we give him more medication to try to control them, and despite all the medication, he still has about 20 to 25 a day at the worst. How much more medication can his little body take? He is on 19 medication for 34 doses a day and take more medication than most of us will in a lifetime, and despite this, he continues to struggle. We had to say enough was enough. We had to do something. We had to think outside the box. We searched the internet, read articles, talked to other families, got involved in social media, and like some of the presenters before me, we came across stories of families being helped by medical marijuana. Sometimes as a parent, you become desperate. You have to find something because you try every option you have, and you cannot just stand there and let your son or your daughter just suffer. We happened to find an amazing group of parents who were also looking for relief for their kid. We failed, and since conventional medicine has just failed us, we had to get the option to try medical marijuana. So we took the case to the next level, to the people who actually can change the law, to some of you sitting here today. We lobbied endlessly for a bill as a capital. The Gold Dome become a second home. We raised awareness. We preached to anyone that would listen when we did medical marijuana for a kid. Our kids have suffered so much, they deserve the relief. On March 20th, at midnight, I stood in the gallery of the Senate. Watch your bill die. Watch your hope vanish. Watch your effort go up in smoke. This will forever be one of the worst days of my life, the day I failed my son. And while most everyone went home that night, I didn't. No, I didn't go home. I didn't have an option. I went to Children's Hospital as Jagger was laying in the intensive care unit after another surgery. Before I left that morning, I promised him the help was on the way. Now I have to tell him that I failed him, but the help was not on the way. We knew all along it was a very long shot. But it was the only little tiny piece of hope we had left, so we had to try. I walked into the room. My wife was sleeping on the chair. Jagger was laying on his hospital bed with tubes and cable coming out of him. I grabbed his hand, and I just lost it. I cried. I cried because my son was dying. I cried because I could not give him the help he needed. I cried because we had no option left. We had nothing else we could do for him. I cried because we tried everything except medical marijuana. Something happened at that moment. Jagger must have felt my desperation. As I was holding his hand, very briefly he opened his eyes for the first time in several hours. Jagger never spoke a word in his life. But that look was more powerful than any word he could have ever said to me. It was a look that said, I know you tried, Daddy, I love you, and I'm going to fight, so please keep fighting for me. That was a defining moment in my life, a moment when I decided that I wouldn't stop at nothing to try to get my son help. So I had to see it for myself. I heard the story, but I had to say to myself, I took vacation from work, I cashed my frequent flyer points, and I flew to Denver. I had to talk to people. I had to see if this is really happening, if that was really what people were saying it was. And I talked to doctors, families, caregivers, growers. And what I found that the little hope we lost on March 20th was still there. It was just not in Georgia, it was in Colorado. I went home to my wife to discuss our option. Could we even think about this? Was there even an option for us? Jagger was so weak. His team of doctors and hospice nurses warned us that he probably would not survive a trip to Colorado. But we had no choice. We had to try something. He was getting worse daily and suffering. So after a few weeks of complex planning, and thanks to the help of Journey of Hope, on August 8th, we hit the road. Yes, we had to drive because Jagger cannot fly. He required too much oxygen to be allowed in the plane. The Journey of Hope quickly turned into a trip from hell. Jagger does not travel well by car. After every 4 hours or so, we had to stop and spend the night somewhere. He was in so much pain, screaming for being seated in his car seat. When his oxygen level would get so low, then we could not continue. It took us 6 days, 24 hours, and 1,450 miles later, but on August 13, we arrived to a new apartment in Denver, Colorado. As of today, Jagger's been on the oil for exactly 3 weeks. We've already seen a lot of progress. His seizures have been reduced by around 30%. He's more vocal, more alert. He's looking at us more and he's smiling. We are very excited for the next few weeks as we are going to try different dosage and ratio of the oil to try to achieve maximum benefits for him. But for logistical, personal, and mostly medical reasons, this move to Colorado is only temporary. We want to make sure that when his time comes, Jagger can pass our home in Georgia, in the house he loves, in the place he calls home. We do want to come home. Please help us make available in Georgia what is available in Colorado. Medical marijuana that can help hundreds of suffering children and adults. Medical marijuana that can relieve from seizure, from pain, and much more. Relief that comes into the form of a whole inclusive bill, not limited to CBD only. I stand before you today asking you to consider 2 things quickly, and I know time is running, but 2 things I would like you to consider when you're looking at the bill. Number 1 would be the in-state cultivation. We saw that with all the states around us that passed a bill. None of those people have been helped yet because they don't have a way to get the product. I think Mr. Cook talked about it in the last hearing. And there's a way to do this safely, efficiently, and tightly regulated. A way we could provide Georgia with the cannabis needed for its patient. The second thing is we need full-spectrum cannabis. We need an all-inclusive bill that does not restrict marijuana compounds. This is extremely important. I cannot stress this enough. We must have all the compounds. They work better together, something called the entourage effect. They work best as a team. They need each other. Unfortunately, over the years, many opponents have done a great job to demonize one of the main compounds called THC. But despite all those lies and despicable propaganda spread by the foes of medical marijuana, studies are on our side. They are showing that THC is actually an amazing part of the plant and it can save life. The tide is turning. Studies from Spain, Israel, and even Harvard University show that full-spectrum cannabis can not only reduce or eliminate brain tumor, but also cure certain forms of cancer. The Institute of Medicine research has shown that the most effective way to fight the pain, nausea, vomiting, and lack of appetite when AIDS and chemotherapy patients are experiencing daily is with full-spectrum cannabis. A study from the Netherlands revealed that full-spectrum cannabis is the best option for many multiple sclerosis patients to deal with the pain. And despite the concern and unfounded statement that full-spectrum cannabis is not safe, I can promise you it's much safer than most of the drugs that our kids are taking today. The National Cancer Institute even found on the research that because cannabinoid receptors are not located in the part of the brain or the brainstem that controls the breathing, it's literally impossible to overdose on medical marijuana. It does not kill. Medical marijuana does not kill. The benzo and opioid that my son is taking can kill him. People do not die from medical marijuana usage or overdose. Instead, it saves life. And a recent study published in the Internal Medicine Journal just a few weeks ago showed that states with legal medical marijuana program have seen a rate of overdose of prescription painkiller reduced by 25%. So as you draft your next bill, I ask you, when you look at the overwhelming evidence and consider the need for full-spectrum cannabis, please do not focus on CBD only. This will only help a select few and will not benefit so many others which are in dire need of help and relief like my son. The studies have shown in many patients that the combination of CBD and THC is what is needed for maximum benefit. I ask you to think about Jagger and his daily struggle as you make your decision regarding the future of medical marijuana in Georgia. Please do not make me tell my son I failed him again. I ask you, today you have the opportunity to change life of Georgia children and adults who are suffering. You have the ability to take the suffering away. And I beg you, please don't miss that chance again. Thank you very much. Right now, we're still playing with that. So right now, it's still on a very low level. It's also on a very low dose because we just started, so we're gradually building it in. Some of the recommendation from the doctor there was to try to get to 5% and see what happened after that. And 5% THC to try to control his pain and see if that work or not. So.
Any other questions? Scott,
I was actually,
go grab the mic.
I'm sorry, beg your pardon.
what, and I apologize, when you say full spectrum medicinal cannabis, what are you talking about? For the cannabinoid oil plus the THC, or you're talking about more like, there are different forms depending on the illness?
No, I'm talking about no restriction, no, not just CBD or not just THC. I'm just talking about all the compounds together. Yeah, I'm not talking about the method of delivery, just to have all the compounds together to get the full entourage effect.
Scott, thank you.
Thank you very much.
I know you and Jagger as well, too. There's a picture of him in my office, so we'll do our best to see if we bring it back.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Garrison, come back. David, yeah, come on. Mr. David Garrison.
Thank you all for having me here. My name is David McGarrison. I'm a 8th generation Cobb County resident, a lifelong Georgian, but I'm going to try and keep up with the speed of his tongue so that we can move right along. For that reason, I'm going to give a short, brief history of my cancer, 2-time recovery, and the hell of chemo in between, and thus the reason for whole plant medicinal cannabis. Okay? Again, my name is David Garrison. As I just reiterated or said, is that I'm a 2-time cancer patient. The first time around, I was diagnosed with colon cancer. I had a 6-inch colon tumor. They gave me a 20% chance to live. I had to qualify through radiation and chemo for that procedure. That was about a 4-month process with chemo and radiation. After such, I did qualify. They removed successfully the tumor, but unfortunately, 10 days later, I had a massive wound that required 18 months worth of wound care at Piedmont Hospital. I'm very fortunate to have survived that as well. For this reason, I'm going to just move right along with a written piece, and then I'm going to come back and finish, and hopefully y'all have some questions for me. As I said before, I'm a cancer survivor. That's lung and colon cancer. The neuropathy resulting from the many chemo treatments is an ongoing painful consideration. Recently, I went through 6 months more of intense chemo treatments and am recovering from several painful surgeries. Thus, I was prescribed various narcotics for pain, including hydrocodone and Oxycontin, both having deleterious effects on my health. I come here today to testify to you about my experience with regard to the use of cannabis in treating the effects of chemotherapy on me and in extreme pain with the cannabinoids without the dangerous use of narcotics for my condition. I chose to try cannabis as a medicine because of Georgia's Medical Marijuana Necessities Act of 1980, which authorized the use of cannabis for mitigation of chemotherapy effects for both study and compassionate use. I realized that to get through this extremely trying part of my life and these treatments, I should at least try cannabis. I had a difficult time enduring the effects of chemo. It was recommended that I try using cannabis to minimize the effects of the therapy. It worked, as I was able to minimize the nausea, somewhat able to eat. It did lessen the anxiety, and cannabis made me feel better, and I was able to continue somewhat of a daily normal routine. Then there was the extreme pain I experienced from surgery and also the neuropathy resulting from chemo. Let me tell you, whole plant cannabis therapeutics work. I was able to tolerate the pain without the stupefying effects of the narcotics that were prescribed to me in the unlimited quantities. Not only are narcotics dangerous and addictive, they were not as effective in moderating pain as cannabis. All I can tell you is that it worked for me. Georgia has been left behind in the study of these cannabis therapies, even after the will of the people initiated and passed state legislation to implement a patient qualification review board to approve both patients and doctors for the use of cannabis. Since this law was enacted over 34 years ago, thousands of patients could have been helped. They have not been helped, however. They have been denied treatment that, in my experience, works. National and international studies have repeatedly shown that cannabis therapies improve the lives of many patients with a variety of illnesses. Many show that the whole plant entourage effect is a real and effective method. There are some indications that certain cancers can be treated directly with cannabis. Recent studies show that there is an approximate reduction of narcotic overdoses in 25% in the states that have legalized medicinal or medical marijuana. To date, 23 states, several states, and the District of Columbia have legalized medical marijuana. I beg this committee to proceed in haste in pursuing this medical marijuana remedy and to provide the relief to its citizens that is already mandated by law. Fund research, provide compassionate relief, and allow Georgians access to cannabis for medicinal use by the recommendation of their personal physicians. There is another serious and threatening problem for patients out of time, waiting for the legal authorization to use cannabis in treatment of illness or pain. For those that choose to use cannabis to treat their conditions without the legal protections provided under law, they risk arrest, conviction, jail, legal costs, and the possibility of losing their insurance for the treatments of an illness that can be and does benefit from cannabis use. Can anyone sit and tell someone that although they could benefit from cannabis therapy, they should not use it because that puts them in legal jeopardy? I know this process is lengthy and difficult, but I must tell you that these patients who face continued deterioration and death cannot wait for treatment. They cannot delay necessary relief. They have little time to wait for implementation of a law that has already passed. This is why amnesty is imperative. I beg you to consider that your first order of business should be to provide some form of amnesty for patients who can demonstrate a medical necessity for cannabis treatment. Whether it is obtained from an illicit market or from another medical state, these patients should not be subject to arrest or threat or legal prosecution for their use of cannabis. Please consider carefully what your families would do with the same choices facing them. Amnesty for medical use of cannabis is not only just and fair, it is a medical necessity. Now, I want to add or close with a couple of words, and that is such. I've been through the cancer side of it. I know that the portion of chemo that eats you alive. And anxiety was really the most satisfying thing for me. That was something I really didn't see coming. I mean, we all know about the hunger situation or appetite or nausea. We also figure that pain is a big part of it. But what we don't really see, or is a more subliminal touch, is the effects on anxiety during this hard time. Both during chemotherapy and as I am currently about 5 months, post 6 months of dramatic chemo, metastasized cancer in my right lung. So with that, I'll close. I'll say thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I hope you understood what I said because it was read very quickly and also with some stumbles. But there I stand.
Any questions from the members? We're glad to hear you on the other side of the cancer. And look forward to it.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. I appreciate it. Yes, sir.
I appreciate you being here. Your testimony, your privilege that you have taken, utilized law.
Yes, sir.
Now, let's talk about this in Washington. How you were able to access that, how it's prescribed.
Wow, that's well, in the realistic formulation, I had to have medical supervision, obviously, with the massive amount of chemicals that I had going through my body. Upon that, obviously, we had to determine what the risk was. So I'm one of those few people that in trying and doing such had to actually cross the walk and to procure it in ways that are not formally possible for many. In that I'm saying that I had to do something illegal. But with my doctor's provision, I chose to do such a thing. And I didn't do it often, and I don't want to make it sound as though there's something to which I have on an effect of I've seen 10 cans full, and in the sense of in the old medical journals we'll see the same thing. But I did regularly use the whole plant method, and I did use it when my stomach, only when there were peaks and valleys in my nausea. But most importantly was, as I said before, the pain was real, and it was a reducer. And in light of the Oxycontin and oxycodone counts that they were giving me per month, which were somewhere around 180 to 240 pills a month, I was able to reduce that down to around 35 to 60. So it was a massive, massive reduction in pill taking.
So you had to break the law.
I absolutely had to break the law. I didn't want to have to admit such a thing under the microphone scope. As you can tell, you got me sweating up here, Representative Gravely, but it did. I tried to squirrel out of it. Thank you all again.
Mr. Garrison, thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Ms. Darrell Hayes. Darrell Hayes. Anyone? Tell us who you are and what you are.
And actually, as usual, my wife will do most of the speaking today. But I will say one thing first.
You identify yourself.
Yes, I am Darrell Hayes. My son, Darrell Jr., is autistic, has epilepsy. My wife will... All right. My wife has some prepared remarks, but I do want to say you don't see the people when they disappear and move out of the state. We were invisible to begin with, and that has to change, and we appreciate your efforts today.
There's my two men folk. I actually have a third one, and these men are the delight and joy of my life. Darrell was diagnosed with a seizure disorder when he was 3.5 years old. We were told he'd be on medication the rest of his life. At 5, I thought I saw a few breakthrough seizures, and an EEG revealed that in 30 minutes Darrell had 70 seizures. It was a miracle that he could walk at that point in time. By the time he was 8, we were facing the fact that we could no longer manage Darrell and his behaviors in our home. And in a last-ditch effort to try to manage the seizure disorder from which the behavior stemmed, we had a telemonitoring done. It was one of 3 that we eventually had done, where they put the electrodes on the head and they plugged us by a 50-foot cable into the wall, and they videotaped Darrell so that we could align his behaviors with the seizures. I will never forget the tech that put the electrodes on his head bursting into tears because of the strands of gray that ran through an 8-year-old child's hair from the stress of the seizures on his body. Within 24 hours, Darrell was critical. They were moving into ICU, and according to one of the doctors, we were losing our child. After we restarted his seizure medications, the doctor came into the room and told us the best option that we had for quality of life. And by the way, Darrell's now 28 years old, so we're kind of on the other side of this. The best option that we had for quality of life for Darrell was a corpus callosotomy, where they divided the left half of the brain from the right to stop the drop seizures. By the time Darrell was 12, we were on a cocktail of at least 4 different seizure medications. And I'm going to change up a little bit from what some of the people were saying, and we're going to talk a little bit about money. By law, the school system has to provide a free and appropriate public education. Because Darrell could not be managed in the state of Georgia, our school system in Bibb County had to pay over $100,000 a year for Darrell to leave the state to a school system that could manage him in South Carolina. And so I know that we have to look at the emotional impact on our families, but we also have to look at the financial impact on our state. And so because Georgia has not been able to successfully manage a lot of our issues, as you see, we're losing people. We're losing taxpayers. We're losing valuable resources to other states, and I just wanted to address that a little bit while I was speaking about that. Darrell, by age 18, had a VNS device implanted in his chest, and what this is a pacemaker for the brain. Darrell has had this device replaced 3 times. What this pacemaker for the brain does is it sends an electrical stimulation to the vagus nerve. 80% of that stimulation goes to his brain, with the thought that seizures being electrical misfires, this will retrain his brain. Most people that have this device implanted experience 30 seconds of electrical stimulation, and then the device is off for 5 minutes. Darrell's seizure disorder is significant enough that the device is on for 30 seconds and only off for 40 seconds, so our battery doesn't last really long. When we saw Charlotte, as you've heard mentioned today, We were amazed, enthralled, compassionate. We felt a kinship, but most of all, for the first time in a very long period of time, we felt some hope. And as we have listened to the different speakers today, my husband leaned over and said, "You're moving to Colorado. Don't make me, because we will." With Daryl, what we want for him is what any parent wants for their child, and that's the best quality of life that he can possibly have. As you've heard several people today mention Lennox-Gastaut, we got that diagnosis last year. We have not tried cannabis oil. For those of you who really don't understand what Lennox-Gastaut is multiple types of seizures that you have. You have the big seizures, the little seizures, and everything in between. It comes with developmental delays. It comes with behavior issues, and it comes with threat to your life. And at this point, the medications alone are going to destroy Daryl's liver. So how could anybody see medical marijuana as an evil? I'm kind of going to end up by saying that I think it's time for Georgia to step up and be leaders in this area. I don't think we need to keep coming in 48th and 49th and 50th in the nation in how we treat our children. And I want to say that by the world standards or the value system that most people use, people would probably look at our son and say he doesn't have a whole lot of value because he is not going to be a contributing member to society the way things stand. And I can sit here and I can tell you how much we value our son, but I will tell you he's been a life changer for everybody whose lives he's touched. I will tell you that his caregivers, 2 young women, went on to be a doctor, one specializing in autism, one became a social worker. Because of Daryl, people have come into our lives that, because of Daryl, we're here today, advocating not only for our family, but for other families. Because of Daryl, I met a woman who has turned out to be the best friend God could ever give me. And together we formed an agency that provided a summer program in this area for 19 years for students with disabilities and at-risk youth. And what I want to say about Daryl is that Daryl's caused a lot of changes, and I hope that through this he'll continue to cause change.
And I'd like to add something. That picture doesn't show it quite well. And I know the doctor would ask this question shortly. Daryl functions when he's tested at 18 months, but he functions so much higher than that. You can tell cognitively that he understands what's going on, that he can start towards an object and lose it and turn because he doesn't remember. Similar to Alzheimer's, he will not remember where he was headed. He has no speech, he's in diapers, but he knows how to hug.
And as far as clinical trials, we are willing to engage. And we have not tried the cannabis oil yet, but it is on our horizon. And please don't make my husband make me move to Colorado.
And I will comment on that. When we first heard the CNN story, as everyone else here did, we knew that someone was taking up the mantle, and the time frame has slipped by. We've got to reconsider that and keep in mind the time frame also of getting to Colorado, getting on the list, getting things established. Hopefully Georgia can do something ahead of that. You have to think not only of the loss of taxpayers, I'm a financial guy, of taxpayers now, but generations of taxpayers, and also just doing what is right. Thank you.
Well, and one more thing on the financial side of it, because I have to have the last word. Daryl's medication is over $16,000 a year, and he has an unusual situation. My husband works for GE. We have GE insurance. He also has Medicaid. It's more his supplement. He has a Medicaid waiver. He's currently in a group home because he has to be supervised 24 hours a day. And I just think that, looking at the financial side of that, these are all factors that we understand that you are responsible for morally and fiscally guiding our state. And I think that I have to ask the question sometimes if the pharmaceutical companies really want me to change and spend $300 a month for cannabis oil versus $16,000 a year on their product. It's just a question I have.
Is he on the now waiver?
Yes, No, actually, he is on the waiver that provides residential and day services, and I will come up with the acronym in a minute. We have so many acronyms.
On the comp waiver?
On the comp waiver.
Yeah.
And actually, you know, I don't mind telling you anything, so don't hesitate to ask any questions, much to my husband's chagrin sometimes. You know, we have to...
Easy. You don't know what I'm going to ask.
Yes.
Well,
If it helps, whatever.
we're probably one of the few people in the room that will actually get back most of our income tax. Let's just put it that way.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate y'all being here.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, can I ask this real quickly? I just appreciate what you're going through, and I'm sorry that you and other families are going through. And I think that we're going to work real hard to help you. I don't know what help looks like right now. It's just like success for a child, success for two children. It looks entirely differently. And what one person's level of success or measure of success or definition of success is entirely different from what another's is. And after our last meeting, our last hearing in Atlanta, I requested from the House a copy of the DVD. And as my wife and I watched the DVD together, and we too have developmentally delayed children and with disorders and problems and so forth. My wife said to me, I'm glad we didn't know about this a few years ago, because had we known about this a few years ago, we wouldn't be living in Georgia today. And fortunately for us, one of our children that suffered the most his health has settled down, and we would have been a medical refugee as well. So I don't think that your statements, yours and others, are lost on any of us. And the pain that you're enduring and the circumstances that you're subjected to, we're very empathetic, and hopefully we can help you in some way.
Thank you. I think I cut us off.
Good.
I think that all of us in this room want to thank you for your concern, for being here today. We appreciate the attention that you're giving to each of us, because I've watched your faces, and we appreciate it from every standpoint, and more power to you. And if you would please stress to some of your colleagues that not legalizing this basically only keeps the law-abiding citizens from not utilizing it. So
I understand.
Thank you very much.
As you mentioned about the attention for each guest, and I apologize, and I take full responsibility for this. I understood that we were going to conclude at 3, and I will not be able to hear all the testimony today, and I apologize to those families whose testimony I will not get to hear. And hopefully I'll have a chance to hear it through the DVD, and I regret that I won't be able to hear it later today. I made a 5:30 commitment back in Atlanta, and I think I have to honor my commitment.
thank y'all. Thank y'all very much.
Thank you. Our next presenter, Christina Cusack. Christina, you here? Come on up. Glad to get to you. Folks, I know we're running a little behind. Just hang in there with us. We're going to try and hear from everybody that's taking the effort to show up today that was scheduled to testify. So, Christina, thank you for being here. Look forward to your testimony, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Just a moment, let me.
It's all right. You get settled. You can take as much time as you need.
Oh, no.
You'll eventually get that microphone as close to you as you can. Actually, that one on your right hand.
This one?
You're welcome to hold it if that's easier for you as well, too.
All right.
Tell us about you and your story.
I would like to start off by thanking the committee for your giving me the opportunity to speak here today. My name is Christina Cusack. I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in 2009. I was diagnosed once my doctors found that the excruciating amount of pain that I was feeling randomly in my back that was considerably getting worse it just took over. My doctors were very confused and not sure which way to go with this. They did some tests, and as the time went on, I started losing my appetite completely. This got to the point where the pain was so bad that the idea of eating or thinking about eating made me want to vomit, which brought my weight down to 80 pounds, okay? This pain that I was experiencing is like your spine just grinding into your pelvis, like into your back, and it's so hard to describe, and it's one of those things that takes everything out from under you, and it leaves you, it left me, depressed, as though I didn't have anything to offer. I couldn't do anything. They sent me in for MRIs. I got those done. That's where they saw the lesions done in my brain, and they also looked at my spine, where I had considerable damage to the myelin in between the bones in my spine. Because this was such a difficult battle for me, I had started talking to a lot of my friends about what they would suggest that I try, because the drugs that they were putting me on, I'm a tiny person, and taking, OxyContin and codeine and all these different drugs puts me on a whole nother planet. I'm in a whole nother world, and I can't function if I can't see what I'm doing or think about what I'm doing clearly. So my friend said, why don't you, she asked me, have you ever tried marijuana? And I said, no. And she said, well, why don't you give it a shot? So she came over, and I smoked a little bit. And I'm going to be completely honest with you guys and tell you, it was mind-blowing how quickly the pain simply just eased off. I felt like a completely different person. Now, I've been experiencing this pain for years now, and it just completely, like, I felt happy. My depression kind of subsided significantly. And I got my appetite back, which was huge. They had put me on a steroid treatment of 5 days to get my balance back and to get me walking again, because I wasn't. And so, trying the marijuana gave me the opportunity to see that actually it does have some benefits in terms of treating pain. Now, I've never been high before, so I don't really know if there was something that I was experiencing that is, different. But based on the research that I did after I experienced this, I found that marijuana has shown to benefit MS patients by the significantly, the whole plant, specifically the THC. I believe that any patient who finds relief from this whole plant form should be given the opportunity to try it. What I don't understand is the forcing that I'm forced to do in order to feel good and want to participate in life. I have to go and look for it somewhere, and I don't want to do that. That's not safe, and I've got way too many drugs inside of me and doctors with me that I need something that is consistent, that I can be tracked upon and know that it works. And I know for a fact that after trying this and using it since, I have been extremely, extremely satisfied. I think that if we were able to allow safe access, studying, and more research to the actual drug, I think it could prevent, or it could allow a lot of different, or allow for a lot of different, you know what I mean. Anyways, so first off, I'd like to show you what I do when I didn't smoke and can't smoke. I have, first off, this is a body cream, okay? The main ingredients in this body cream is ketamine, okay? Anybody here know what ketamine is? On the street, it's a horse tranquilizer, yes, but on the street, Special K, okay? So, and that's that's a dangerous drug. That's a very dangerous drug. I'm not eating this, but I'm rubbing it on my back to make it feel better. So I have that. In order to treat my actual multiple sclerosis and their symptoms, I am forced to give myself an injection every night, every day of the week for the rest of my life until they come up with something better. Okay? That's this. Every night, I have to poke myself with one of these. Okay? It's not fun, it doesn't help, and it doesn't, you know, it scares me more than anything else, to be perfectly honest. Finally, I would like to show you the last group of medication. Now this, my needles are the only thing that treats the multiple sclerosis. This here, okay, this baggie that I have here, every single pill in this baggie I take every day. Okay, every day I take a pill out of this bag, or take these pills. These pills are what treat the pain, the anxiety, and the depression that goes along with the multiple sclerosis, okay? I would much rather deal with a drug that is grown out of God's green earth than something that has been formulated in a lab. I don't think that something formulated in a lab could provide any safe benefits to me. I think the risks on my liver and my kidneys are too large for me to have to take those risks. I don't want to do it. I'm young. I can't tell you how much this has changed my life completely, and that's why I'm here today. So in conclusion, I'd like to ask you guys to keep your minds and your hearts open as you continue to educate yourselves on the benefits of the cannabis therapeutics for all patients suffering from disease and other pain. You know, further research. Let's get into this. Let's get a hold of this, you know, industry. I mean, Georgia has the most outstanding ground for farming. You know, I mean, we can grow this stuff here and make a fortune out of it just being an industry. You know, and I can't tell you how baffled I am that it's taken this long for the government to see the benefits that this actually provides. So I thank you again for all of your time. And if you have any questions, please ask.
Thank you, Ms. Cusack. We appreciate you taking the time to be here. Any questions from the members of the committee? Appreciate you taking time and energy to be here, and I'm sure wish you the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Joshua Latrell, am I Joshua? I'm pronouncing your last name right? Littrell.
Well, it's literal outside the county lines, Littrell.
Okay. We're glad to have you here.
I'm sorry. Say, we just became buddies, and
That's right.
after,
Meeting at the Capitol.
yeah, it's become a concentration group.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
thank you. Short-term memory loss is another problem.
Mr. Latrell? Would you begin your testimony?
Yes, sir. Representative Peak, I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all today. Members of the committee, thank you very much. I'm Joshua Littrell. I live in Lawrenceville. I grew up in Raven County, Georgia, so lifelong Georgia resident from the mountains. Joined the United States Air Force when I was 17. Went in 99, served 6 years, a couple tours overseas, and was honorably discharged with a service-connected disability as well. So I have a unique opportunity to sit here and tell my story with you all today that's completely different, I think, than everybody else. I moved to Vermont a few years ago, specifically after Vermont legalized medical marijuana. And they did it through dispensaries and allowing clients or patients to grow their own product. I was one of those growers. So I had the unique opportunity to grow my own medical marijuana, which was really, really a tremendous opportunity to treat myself and know what I'm putting inside my body. Senator Miller, you mentioned earlier, you don't know what that answer is. I do, sir. That answer is medical marijuana, whole plant, that's with dispensaries, that's being regulated through the state of Georgia, so that we know what our patients are getting.
You know, I deal with a litany of things all day long. As Christina was mentioned earlier, the amount of pills she takes on a daily basis. I'm 33 years old. I have an appointment that I've been waiting 6 months next week on Monday with the VA to get in, and we're going to talk about back surgery at 33 years old. You know, that's not something I want to undergo, but it's something that I have to think about. So I actually moved back here knowing what was going on here and some other family issues. My father had a heart attack, and my grandparents are getting older, so I wanted to be back closer to home. But the opportunity for us to step out in front of what we're trying to do and get a grasp on this medical cannabis is really an opportunity that I feel wholeheartedly that we can do a justice for our patients in the room here, not only of those patients, but those veterans as well. What it can do for PTSD, what it can do for chronic pain management. There's so many different benefits that people don't understand, that they could understand. The one thing that I want to caution and urge us as the great state of Georgia is, instead of reinventing the wheel, why don't we follow somebody who's already done it, like the state of Vermont, with the legalization of medical marijuana, doing it through dispensaries, doing it through on-patient growth. That's a tremendous avenue that I think could be a really good opportunity for us. It was great for me to go to Vermont, be able to not have to go down to the corner and buy a bag of weed from somebody I didn't know. I grew this product and knew what went into it on my own. I did this and cultivated it. In the meantime, while I was growing it, I was able to go to the dispensary and get the medication that was needed. So that was a great opportunity that I had to medicate. Now, what that allowed me to do is to get through my day the way that these pills that I take, the handful of pills I take every single day, doesn't allow me to do. I started on a very low dose of Vicodin when I was in my mid-20s after serving overseas in Operation Rocky Freedom. Came back, had some injuries, started on a low dose of Vicodin. I'm on the highest dose of hydrocodone that you can be on now. Next step after that is Percocet, morphine. Look where I'm going. This road I'm going down. I'm 33 years old. I can't continue to go down this road when I know what that answer is, and that benefit from the medical marijuana, the medical cannabis that's there, that allows me to sleep at night. I sleep about 3 or 4 hours a night because I roll around, toss around. I can't get comfortable because of the chronic pain that I have stenosis, bulging disc, herniated discs. I got a pinched nerve in my neck. I actually can't feel my right arm, and my left 3 fingers are numb, and that's why I'm going to the VA on Monday to get this treated and taken care of, hopefully. But they wanted me to take Neurontin, and I took it for a year before I went to Vermont. I got up to 3,600 milligrams of Neurontin. That's 12 pills a day of this stuff. Anybody know where the zombie show is filmed? Here in this great state of Georgia, right? I was one of those zombies, walking around like a zombie on that 3,600 milligrams of this medication that's treated nerve pain, epileptic seizures, that kind of thing. So I knew I could not go on like that anymore. It's crazy. When I get to the end of my day, 2, 3 o'clock, I'm wiped out from the pain meds I'm on every single day. You know, the sweating, the issues with bowel movements, things like that. I mean, these are the things that we have to think about for our patients. So that's the opportunity that we have to put this legislation through to make a tremendous impact, not only for those children that we've heard about today, but for those adults in the constituents that you have, knowing that we can change their lives forever. That's the kind of impact that we can have. So that's my charge. You know, just don't reinvent the wheel. That's really what it's all about. And I really appreciate the opportunity. Be happy to answer any questions you may have as well.
Appreciate your testimony. Greatly appreciate your service.
Thanks, sir. I really appreciate that.
Never take that for granted.
Yes, sir.
Given never take this for granted. Great to meet members. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Any members of the committee? Senator Graff?
Yes, sir. That's perfect.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I have one question. How did the state of Vermont regulate your personal growth?
So they don't typically regulate the personal growth. What they do is they give you guidelines. I could have 2 mature plants and 5 immature plants at any one time. What they do is they allow you to, you have to have open access. So they can come in and inspect your grow area or wherever you're growing it. It has to be under lock and key. So you have to have a protected area that nobody can get into and steal the medication and that thing. And actually it was unique in Vermont. I grew hydroponically because, as you all know, it snows up there a fair amount. So I actually grew indoor. And it was crazy because my landlord was a cop. And he had never seen anybody. It was interesting. He'd never seen this before because they just legalized it when I moved up there. It's the reason I went up there. So Randy and I had a conversation, and he actually got diagnosed with cancer right after I got up there, throat cancer. So he would come to me. No, because you can be a caregiver that you can actually grow medical marijuana for someone, like those people who are paralyzed and can't grow on their own, or somebody who's indigent and can't do it on their own. You can have a caregiver. You could also be one who's growing it on your own for yourself. So I was able to have that opportunity to provide Randy with something as well. He also had a dispensary there as well, but you know, it was just something that knowing that opportunity is there. When my landlord's a cop and was totally against it until, wow, he gets stage 4 throat cancer and didn't know if he was going to make it, and luckily he did.
When you said they would come by, is that an agent of the state?
Yes, sir. Agent of the state. So they have an agency that regulates that. And, you know, it would be something we could look at. And it may not be something that has to be regulated that tremendously. I mean, I know we want regulations on this, but for people who are growing personally for their own medication, they're not going to be growing this to distribute. What we've got to do is be stringent about who we're giving the medical marijuana cards to. You know, and we have to make sure that these doctors aren't the pain clinics that are just handing out pain meds all day long. That's not what we want, you know. We got to make sure it's legitimate issues that we're trying to treat. And those people, you're not going to have a problem with. I can promise you that. Because I know that I never sold anything because that's not what I was doing it for. I was growing it for my own personal benefit. This is medication that worked for me. I'm not going to give that stuff away or sell it to anybody. Yes, sir.
I'll be really, I think I'm loud enough.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you talk a little bit just about what that process looked like to become a grower? Are there limitations on who can grow, the number of growers, and then how do you notify, you had to notify them that you were dispensing to this other person, right?
Yeah, correct. There's a whole application process before. There's a whole department for the medical marijuana department of Vermont. You actually have to apply to be a caregiver. They have to come in and, you know, they have to make sure that it's good. Your doctors actually have to sign off. You actually have to see a physician for a full year before you can get a medical marijuana card. So I didn't just move to Vermont and get my medical marijuana card. I had to see a doctor for a treating physician for a full year. The struggle that I have is the VA. Guys, you know that it's federally funded. It's federally taken care of. The VA can't do anything about the medical marijuana. They can't give me what works for me. So I had to go to a Vermont doctor, you know, and be seen there. And you have to establish that relationship with that doctor so that they can understand it, and then you see the benefit behind it. So there is a true application process behind it. They issue you an ID. I'll actually be happy to show it to you if you want. That shows that you are a caregiver. And actually, you know, I kept mine all posted, the signs around the grow saying, hey, here's my ID, in case somebody were to come in, you know, or something like that happens when I'm not there. If a cop decides they're going to raid, you know, or something like that, at least my information's up and it's taken care of. So a true application process on that, and they've really vet those people tremendously well.
And are you calling grower and caregiver, are those synonymous?
Yes, ma'am, they can be the same or they can be different.
Okay, thank you.
Correct.
Real quick. Mr. Litchfield, thank you for your testimony. Thank you for being here in Atlanta a few weeks ago.
Yes, sir.
And also, as has been mentioned earlier, thank you for your service.
Thank you. I really
And
appreciate
as
it.
these questions indicate, I don't think we quite know what the legislation looks like.
Sure.
That's what I was referring to.
Yes, sir.
Just
Okay,
for
gotcha.
clarification. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
And again, I apologize for my early departure.
Ms. Limper, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate being here, taking time and energy.
Absolutely.
Appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you all very much.
Thank you all for hanging in here. Captain Bailey Lynch, I know. Waiting patiently with your daughter. We got a picture of your daughter as well as the real thing here, so. Glad to have this. Just to take the committee, the members here will give us your name and the first little thing is with you.
Which one?
Yeah, actually, that one.
My name is Catherine Lynch, and this is my daughter, Ann Townsend Lynch. It's a double name. We are in the South. Thank you again for having me and for having this committee hearing today. And I really want to say a special thank you to the other families and patients who have come up and spoken today. because I feel like they're speaking on behalf of my daughter too. And a lot of what they've said, I stand behind, really, all of it. So I'll try and keep my story short. As I said, I'm from Atlanta, born and raised there. My daughter's 3.5. She started having uncontrollable seizures when she was 1 year old. So for the past 2.5 years, we have spent every day trying to get control of these seizures. As you know, seizures can cause brain damage and even death. So having over 100 seizures a day is quite scary. And like everyone else here said, doctors told us the same thing. After 2 different drugs failed to treat her seizures, we were told that there's a less than 1% chance that we'll be able to find any other FDA-approved available drugs to work for her. So we've spent the past 2 years just trying different drugs, different doses, different combinations of doses and different drugs. And you know, as we've all said here today, these drugs they're heavy sedatives, and like most heavy sedatives, death is a side effect. We all know that. It's part of the balance that we're dealing with every day as parents, just trying to really kind of keep our kids alive. These drugs, these FDA-approved drugs, a lot of them actually work, but they work if you put them at a high enough dose to basically put your child into a coma. And that's not acceptable for me and any other parent. But so in my opinion, you know, the seizures can cause death. These drugs can cause death. So really the only difference between the two is that we can control the seizure medications at a dosage low enough just not to kill our children. And that's not a decision you want to have to make every day when you're giving medications to your child. She had a brain injury at birth, so her diagnosis is she doesn't have a syndrome. It's a little different. But all these seizures, these thousands of seizures she's experienced just make that initial injury worse every day. As a result of that injury, the brain injury, initial one, she has the developmental delays. She's yet to hold her head up on her own completely, yet to sit up, roll over, can't eat or swallow well enough to sustain herself, and can't even, you know, scratch an itch, basic things. She's not mobile, she's nonverbal, and then you add these heavy medications to the picture, and she's completely a zombie. She's not alert enough to make eye contact, turn her head toward my voice consistently, or communicate effectively and communicate pain, which is my biggest concern. She was alert enough one time in her life, enough to interact with me and make eye contact, and she laughed that one time this spring, and it's the only time I've heard it, and it was when we were trying to wean her off of phenobarbital. Unfortunately, she had over 20 seizures shortly after and had no choice, but we had to put her back on the phenobarbital. I want to hear that laugh again so badly. It hurts every morning when we have to give her the medications. But that pain is unfortunately nothing compared to the pain of watching helplessly as your child has seizure after seizure. We're doing everything we can to get Ann Townsend into an Epidiolex study. I know we're not talking about that today, but I just want to express that I'm doing everything I can here locally to get any other kind of treatment for my child. I have yet to meet a neurologist who's told me that they wouldn't be open-minded to other treatments if they only had the ability to do it. And so, including cannabis oil, Epidiolex, I have many doctors trying to help us get access to that through compassionate use, without success yet. And I know we're not here to talk about federal laws, but I think it's worth mentioning the fact that, you know, we have studied the negative effects of cannabis through the National Institute of Drug Abuse, and that's all federally, I guess, chartered, if you will. And I think about that, and I think about who the subjects of those studies were. They were teenagers and adults using it for recreational purposes. And there's probably dozens, if not hundreds, of studies on that. And so I ask, you know, how can we deny more research on hundreds of all the different components of this plant, you know, in moderation and under heavy regulation, and expert neurology supervision. How can we deny that to these babies and these kids here in Georgia that are dying? These kids that are just out of options. They're just completely out of options. How can we deny the expert neurologists at Showa in Augusta, in Atlanta, that tell me to my face, like I said, that they would gladly oversee any other option that we could get our hands on? How can we deny that to those doctors? So I'm here not to ask for a cure. I know that medical cannabis isn't going to solve all my daughter's problems, the whole list of them. I'm just asking for a chance at some relief, and that's all I'm asking for is just a chance. Thank you.
Questions from members of the committee? Yeah, Ms. Lynch, I know we've heard several families that evaluated an option going to Colorado. Is that, I'll be the first one who's asked, is that an option that your family's considered?
I have considered it many times, and I still think about it, and I'm still considering it, to be honest. For a lot of reasons, I have chosen to stay here and not do that. I do have to financially support my daughter, and my career is here, my family's here, all of her healthcare support system, and there's a list of many different specialists, as you can imagine. They're all here, and I just can't make any sense of it. I know that in my heart, I probably need to do that. And like I said, I go back and forth. I've just been really trying to focus on what can I do here in Georgia to get her help. And I just don't think it's right. I just don't think I should have to move when the federal government has its own patent on marijuana for medicinal purposes. If they call it a Schedule I drug that has no medicinal purposes, it makes no sense to me, and I have yet to find any person, legislator or doctor, that can give me an answer to these questions. So I also feel like my daughter will lose her biggest advocate here in Georgia to stay here in her home state, and if I take her to Colorado, who's going to be here to fight for her? I mean, there are other people that would fight for her. I'm not saying that, but I think, I feel like I'm her, one of her biggest advocates. So.
If I can answer that question.
Yes.
I know you mentioned that you were evaluating a dialogue trial. The other deal was for submission. Accelerate that at GRU and other positions involved in the plan. Would you mind sharing the status of that? Has that been an option for you?
There's probably some other people here that can speak a little bit more updated information, but my understanding is that through the governor's efforts, they have selected 3 locations and maybe 2 to 3 patients per location. So that's a maximum of 9 kids or patients in the state of Georgia. And then I'm aware of another private neurologist who's applied, I guess, through the compassionate use, but it's limited. I think it's about 25 people that he was approved.
So as of right now, you are not, haven't been eligible or been qualified or accepted into that?
Right. And it's also, there's a lot of hoops you have to get through. Even if he does get a spot open, this private neurologist, you have to show these seizures on video. And I think we actually have accomplished that. I'm waiting on some EEG results, but we have her so medicated. And then to think that the kids who need this the most, if you just can't show on a video that one day that they have seizures, there's just a lot of hoops and a lot of steps taken to get on that. But we're on that path. We're trying to be.
Dr. Wynn, yeah.
Thank you very much. Ms. Lynch, thank you again. I mean, this is tremendous. I remember 20 years ago being in a similar situation as you and seeing my son. My wife became the person comments, but seeing my son in a situation where seizures were tractable and there was nothing about it. And we also tried many medications, the ones that were on the market then were not nearly as good or as safe, actually, as they are now. Very few medicines, I would like to say, because I've heard this a common theme, very few medicines that we give as a neurologist are deadly, even high doses, really very few. Phenobarbital is probably the one that really could do damage. But, so I wouldn't know from the standpoint that this is that cannabidiol, for example, is a safer drug. We don't know yet, do we? We have studies that have shown that it's supposed to be pretty good. There are other studies that show that sometimes it can cause psychosis and other things in high doses. And THC certainly can do that sometimes. So these are things that really should be studied. And I really appreciate your opinion and your willingness to do that, because these are, you don't want to give your daughter something, or anyone else's daughter 10 years from now, something that might be harmful, but also maybe a miracle cure. So that's why I think, in my viewpoint, I don't know if I'm not sure how many people share this with me, but my viewpoint is, let's make sure that what we do, not just here in Georgia, but throughout the country, we're giving people something that's not only effective, and really is effective, but also is safe. And what dose are we should be using? What are the things that we should be trying? And that's why I keep pushing these clinical trials. And I'm not just because I'm trying to be a science wonk or curmudgeon. It's really for the benefit of society in general. And I really appreciate you doing that. They're not placebo-controlled, by the way. No epilepsy study nowadays is placebo-controlled, because it would be controlled compared to what's patients are already on, such as for treatment. So that just thank you again for your willingness to consider this, and I really hope that whatever you do, you hear how it's going.
Thank you. Just a comment. We just don't know enough about this plant, and it's positive, encouraging to hear doctors like yourself have, you're obviously looking into this, and you have a level of knowledge about that, and I appreciate that, and I agree with you wholeheartedly that we need more information. There's, I don't know, more than 400 components in this plant. How do we know what any one of them does exactly, or how the combination of them work together? We need more information. Unfortunately, a lot of us here, we're going to be the pioneers, but when we have no other options right now, we're ready to sign up for these studies. We're ready, and we're ready to help find out more. I know a lot of other parents feel the same way, but for a lot of the other parents and kids that are going to come after us, when I read that U.S. patent, it literally describes the hypoxic ischemic, and stuff, the event that occurred with my daughter when she was born. So if I think are they withholding something? If that could have helped her when she was born, I might not be here right now. And if I could stop that for another parent down the road, I would gladly take part and help in that.
Ms. Lynch, thank you. You were a tireless advocate at the Capitol this past session. Saw a lot of you and a lot of your daughters. Thank you for your efforts.
Thank you.
Thank you for making time to be here today. Thank you so much. I know some of you have waited a long time, and I'm sorry this is taking a little bit longer. Lane and Shannon Cloud, y'all are still here? Appreciate your patience and waiting around. Will too. Glad to have you here today. The floor is yours.
No, thank you. I'll try to make it quick. We're probably behind. No, thank you, Chairman and committee members, for allowing everyone here an opportunity to share our stories. My name is Blaine Cloud. This is my wife, Shannon. We have a 9-year-old daughter, Elena. I think we have a picture at some point. She suffers from Dravet syndrome, which is the same syndrome that Charlotte Figge suffers from. We've heard about that, so I won't get into the details. But she had her first seizure when she was 4 months old. She's had seizures since then. She's on 3 different seizure medications. There she is right there. Just a picture. And she actually had a seizure, one of her seizures about 2 months ago. Was actually in the pool, and luckily I was standing right next to her, and she was actually face down, and I was able to actually get to her and pull her up, and just prayed she didn't have any, sucked any water into her lungs, and thank goodness I got there before she did. But it just reminds us of the fact that someone has to be in arm's length away at all times, and that's just the way it is for basically everyone in this room that's spoken today. She's on 3 different seizure medications: Topamax, Depakote, and Onfi. That seems to be the best mix that works best for her, but they come with a lot of side effects, as we've probably already heard a lot today. Topamax, for example, the side effects are dizziness, weight loss, nausea, fatigue, and depression. What we've seen for Elena is that it causes her to overheat and not even sweat when she's outside playing. She currently only weighs 45 pounds, so it actually decreases her appetite. where she doesn't eat very much. We've actually noticed also that she eats about pretty much the same amount at dinner as her 1-month-old sister. So, 1-year-old. Yeah, 1-year-old. Sorry, did I say 1 month? Yeah. Sorry, 1-year-old sister. Sorry, it's still not very much food. The second seizure medicine is on Depakote, and the most common side effects of Depakote are nausea and liver injury, and this can lead to liver failure. And we really have no idea what the long-term effects on Elena's liver are from Depakote, and we have to have her blood taken periodically to check her levels and actually check her platelet counts as well, because it causes low platelet count and causes her to easily bruise. So that's the side effects of Depakote. The third seizure medication she's on is Onfi, which is a benzodiazepine. As we know, these are highly addictive and slow down the central nervous system. This particular medicine can cause serious skin reactions and changes in mood and behavior. Other side effects, in case skin reactions weren't enough, include depression, confusion, anxiety, irritability, hallucinations, trouble sleeping, and thoughts of hurting yourself or others. Now, again, Elena, being how old she is and her communication issues, she can't tell us if she's experiencing any of those things. So we just have to take it on faith that this medicine is actually working for her and she's not having any of those side effects. We have noticed that she does have behavior issues, and we do have to give her melatonin at night to help her sleep with all these medicines. We've tried to lower these one at a time, but her seizures have increased whenever we've done so. Also, to counteract these side effects that I just mentioned, we also have to give her 2 separate ADHD medications. So that's up to 5 medications now. Those are currently Strattera and Concerta, and we've played around with those as well. One is actually an upper and one is a downer, both working in opposite directions to balance her behavior and focus. Concerta actually is a Schedule II drug, so that's kind of an interesting note. These drugs, actually, some of these are not approved for children under 6, and their long-term effects are unknown. And that's an interesting point, because that's the same argument that some opponents give us when we talk about cannabis, is that their long-term effects are not known. And yet, these medicines we have here are prescribed to our children every day. And this is actually it's actually kind of hard to see, but that's 1 day's worth right there. And the point was, it's a lot. So you can imagine our happiness at seeing children that are actually seeing success out in Colorado. Not only with reducing seizures, but also with no side effects and improved cognition. Now, we know that cannabis may not work for Elena, but all we ask for is that we have it as an option. If we decide if it is an option, hopefully it will be, and we use it and it doesn't work, then we'll just stop using it. No harm done. That's really it. But we have seen that the children in Colorado, that at least 80% of the kids using it are seeing at least a 50% reduction in seizures. And again, with no side effects and improved cognition. None of the dangerous medicines here that I just went over have that much promise. Now, anecdotal evidence is the counterpoint that we've always been given, but anecdotal evidence is still evidence. So, several people have asked us, over these past few months, if we plan on moving to Colorado. It's a very difficult situation for any family, but even more so with one with a special needs child. As you probably heard Sebastian talk about his ordeal of trying to get out there. The point we're trying to make is, why should we even be forced to make that decision? It's the same country. It's why are different states different? Why are different states different? And why should we even be forced to make those difficult choices? How can something be illegal that, on the one hand, has saved so many lives, and yet, on the other hand, hasn't killed one single person? And by that, I mean, from what I've read, there's no documented case of a single incidence of someone dying from a marijuana overdose. That can't be the same said for the medicines that I said here, that I've shown here, because you can easily overdose on any one of those. It's kind of similar. One of our parents, a couple weeks ago, Karina Fisher, she asked the question, how can anything be illegal if it helps save lives? She asked that when the Ebola victims were getting their unapproved medication. And that's true. Why, if something helps save your life, how can it be illegal? It's kind of similar to an ambulance, taking someone to the hospital to try to save their life. You get to run the red lights. Well, the federal government has put up a lot of red lights, and all we're asking you to do is help us run them. So, thank you again for listening to all our stories, and hopefully we can get something done next year.
Thank you, Mr. Cloud. Any questions from the members of the committee? Clouds.
Yeah, we actually want to answer one of the clinical trial questions.
Trial question. So you inquired about how many of us parents would be willing to put our child in the trial. Obviously, for the people that are in Colorado and their kids are seeing success on the treatment, the answer is no way would I move back to Georgia and take a chance that my kid might be the one, 2 out of 10 or whatever, getting the placebo. If they're seeing those effects, they're not going to give that up and move back here for that. For those of us that are sitting here yearning for the treatment and not able to access it, I think without a doubt we would all be willing to put our children in the trial, knowing that hopefully whether we got the medicine or the placebo, the end result would hopefully be that we would end up getting the medication. And as several others have mentioned, we're all trying desperately to get into the Epidiolex trials, but they're so limited. And unfortunately, children with other medical conditions, whether it's cerebral palsy or diabetes or anything like that, those children are automatically excluded. And those are some of the more severe children in our group of families that are told flat out, no, you will never qualify for this trial until it's FDA approved in 3 to 5 years.
And so let me just be clear. So you have tried to get into the Epidiolex trial and been
We've spoken with our neurologist, but again, because he only gets 25 patients, it's very limited. And because Elena has Dravet syndrome, we're hopeful that maybe she'll get to participate in the official FDA trials with GW, because those will start for Dravet and Lennox-Gastaut. But even then, it's not
they've given you a time frame.
fall for the initial, for the short study, so we don't. But even for that, I mean, several people have mentioned that you have to get EEGs and you have to do all these tests. So even though on paper your child may qualify based on the requirements on the clinical trials website, it really comes down to what do they capture on the EEG on that specific day. And if your child happens to have a great day, they may not get included just because of that 8 or 24-hour EEG.
Yeah, Dr. Quinn.
Yes, it's a huge conundrum when you have a substance, a molecule. It's really what we're talking about. All drugs that are in the lab or out of God's green earth, or plants or anything, they're all molecules. They're all the same. They're all drugs. They have effect on the body, on the biological system. But anyway, it's a problem really because if you have something that's widely available for free, and then you try to say to somebody, no, the next person that gets this needs to get in a trial. Well, I understand that. I probably do the same thing. Try to shield the trial and all that rigmarole. But again, for the betterment of the best thing for society in general, not just for this issue, is first to know whether something really works or not. And that's why we do these things. And that's why it's really, really important to get that done, that kind of information. Because we talked about 4 or 5 or 6 different indications here, all of which really need to be studied very carefully and hopefully be shown to be better than non-treatment or sham treatment or whatever you want to call it. And that, because there is a but so that's all I'm trying to say. But if I were in your position, I'd totally understand.
No, yeah, real quick too. I definitely agree. I mean, all kinds of research needs to be done on how this affects, different patients, different people like that. The ironic part is really all anecdotal, of course, that this plant seems to have worked for thousands of years, and yet now we're just trying to fit into the government process to actually get the right research going, and that takes obviously a long time with all the hoops we have to jump through, and that's the frustrating part.
Thank you guys very much. And I've got, this is going to be a process. I'll ask some questions. All evidence leading up is anecdotal at first, right? And I'm just going to say something. I get frustrated. I don't have a desire to use marijuana. I don't have a medical need to use it. I don't have a desire to use it.
do the trials. But I don't think we need to wait.
Exactly.
For the legislation.
Exactly.
I guess beforehand, these patients were this way. They come off, they start using cannabis, and they're this way. I don't know what the definition of proof is. That's proof enough for me.
Absolutely.
And so let's run let's run the test. Let's do that while we're working on legislation, and continue to run tests, because you're right. I think that there's a thumbnail scratch of the potential, medical potential that's on this particular herb, compound, molecule. And so I just think that it's, and I appreciate the testimony. I just wanted to get that out there. I think we're supposed to ask things that some of us may hear feeling, ask. When I hear this thing's been around long while, movies have been made, this, that, and other. And it just, to me, when I hear things, it's potentially dangerous. And I don't know, certain mixes, certain levels, yes, probably are. But I don't hear a lot of people talking about recreational or medicinal benefits of cocaine or heroin or methamphetamines because of recreational use, and then finding out, oh, well, it's got a medicinal purpose. Absolutely it does not. I think law enforcement knows that. I think the medical community knows that. I think the federal government knows that. They're not going to patent anything that they don't have specific information on. So I just wanted to get that out there. I want to say that. Thank you very much.
Gwen, one more follow-up, and then we'll wrap up.
I agree with you, and I'm not, that's a political decision, and I don't have any comment on it. I was just saying that while we're doing this, I really would like to know what level of drug is effective and what level, there's going to be a maximum level at which maybe the equivalent of 10 joints in a pill might be a little bit too much. And we don't know, it would be nice to know what that limit should be. I think, so that's all I'm trying to say.
Yes.
Mr. McClellan. Mr. McClellan, thank you for being here. And thank you also, testimony is up here. Thank you very much. Testimony's right here. Mr. McClellan, thank you. Appreciate your tireless efforts too on this issue at the Capitol last year. We appreciate it, and look forward to seeing you again next January too. Thank you.
Yes, thank you all.
Okay, here's what we're going to do. Here's what we're going to do. I've got two parents and a very important individual from Colorado, and I'm going to ask them to come up last. So if y'all just bear with me, and committee members, just hang in here with me. We also got a distinguished veteran here, Perry Parks. If you'll come up, I know you've taken a long time, and I'm going to ask you to present your testimony, and so come on up, if you will, and we'll let you go first. And so tell us a little bit about you, and I'm going to push you to just move very quickly because I know we're...
Mr. Chairman, I understand exactly what you're talking about.
I'm sorry we've taken so long to get to you today.
This is an incredibly important issue that you're talking about. I'm a retired and disabled veteran, 30 years. I retired in 2003. I was taking a handful of pills for PTSD. I no longer take those pills. I'm not going to go into all of it. What I want to do is to cut to the chase. I want to mention 2 or 3 things that will illustrate the frustration you hear in the back. Number 1, you talked about placebo effect. Does anybody know what CMCR is? Center for Medical Cannabis Research. 10 years of clinical trials at the University of California through 2000 and 2010. Those trials are what turned the federal government, including the VA, upside down. The VA immediately issued a directive for all the veterans in the states where it's legal to be able to use cannabis. So that's 23 states now. In the other 27 states, the veterans are subject to arrest. That cannot be right. We talked about the patent. The patent is on CBD, cannabidiol. That is one of hundreds of cannabinoids in the plant. You cannot get a patent unless you demonstrate that the product you're using does what you say it does. If you look at the 3-word definition in that patent, it says, number 1, it is a cannabinoid. It's part of the marijuana plant. Number 2, it is an antioxidant. And number 3, it is a neuroprotectant. If you're not medical, I've worked with the doctors and the nurses in the states where it's legal for 5 years now. A neuroprotectant means your brain cells are protected during any kind of bleeding. Strokes, TBIs. So if a veteran in Iraq hits an IED and the medic comes around and says, hey brother, where are you from? I'm from New Hampshire. Praise God, man, you can try anything. Hey brother, where are you from? I'm from Georgia. I'm sorry, they're going to put you in jail. If the federal government holds a patent that shows it protects the brain, we got 260,000 veterans with brain injuries. How moral is it because of a law that I can't use it? PTSD, 30 to 40% of all combat veterans suffer from PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. In 2003, when I retired wearing this uniform, I was taking a handful of pills and talking to a psychiatrist once a month. When somebody told me cannabis would do that, I did that in college. Let me try it. And so I tried it. I was shocked. As a Christian, I could not share this news. So much so that now across the United States, I'm portrayed. I've spoken in Colorado, I've spoken in Oregon, and I deliberately tell everybody every day I use it. I used it this morning. I used it this afternoon. Well, not this afternoon yet, but I will.
Because the meeting's lasted too long, huh?
Yeah, I've been here the whole time. But the other 2 important points I'd like to make is that CMCR report, that 10 years clinical trials collection, double-blind placebo-controlled studies. You can do research on any of them. The National Cancer Institute, do you think cannabis really kills cancer? Go to the National Cancer Institute, which is part of the National Institute of Health, and Google cannabis and cancer. And what you will see is Dr. Donald Abrams said, in addition to the treatment of symptoms like pain, nausea, seizures, it can now be used for its direct anti-tumor capability. It is now being used to treat colorectal cancer, not symptoms, to treat the cancer. How good is it? Well, let's put it this way. In trials using MRIs and other medical detection instruments, Dr. Meshulam in the state of Israel has demonstrated that it not only protects the brain during bleeding and all, but it protects against cancer. How does it do it? It goes directly to the tumor. It attacks the tumor cells, but it provides a substance called ceramide, a fatty substance, around the wall of normal cells, so the normal cells are not affected. In Madrid, Spain, which you heard someone mention, breast cancer. In England, prostate cancer. In all cases, the cancer shrank. Every chemotherapy drug we have today, except cannabis, if you increase the dosage to kill the cannabis cell, you kill the normal cell. Now, how wrong is this? We know that it kills cancer. We know that it shrinks the breast tumor. We know that it shrinks prostate cancer. And yet, we can't do it because the federal government says it has no medical qualities. I'll mention one other thing. We've talked about the synergistic effect of drugs and the fact that you're trying to pull CBD oil out alone and to use it as a drug. Several of the people testified that the synergistic effect of all the cannabinoids together is what produces the results. If you want to have some proof of that, GW Pharmaceuticals in England has 10 football fields of different strains of marijuana. And every case they found through their research, which is huge, millions of dollars, they found that what they do is they elevate certain parts of the plant for different disorders. In my case, if you give me CBD oil only, I'm going to go down to the black market and get me some THC because it doesn't work. My pain, my PTSD, no more pills. I sleep at night, no more sleeping pills. I went to my church and I said, look, if this is truth, I mean, isn't that what we're all trying to find, the truth? I said, look at Acts 3:17. Peter looks at the Jews, and they said, it's you who killed him, you and your leaders, even though you did it in ignorance. And I realized then that it's not the marijuana itself, it's the ignorance about it. And that ignorance is produced by the U.S. government. Right now, they don't know what to do because there's so much ignorance that shows how helpful it is. And I really appreciate your testimony. I'll give you one other example of how right this testimony is. In Israel, Netanyahu, the prime minister, issued a press release, and he said, because of the research, any Israeli citizen now can grow and use cannabis under a doctor's supervision for any reason. And that's the current policy in Israel. You didn't see the U.S. news media mention the press release from Netanyahu's office. You also probably didn't hear the Journal of the American Medical Association last week or week before last came out with a study. They said, hey, we've been looking at opioid overdose deaths. I'm a certified safety professional as well as a pilot. You know what leading cause of deaths for years was automobiles. Now that's been passed by what? Prescription drug overdose deaths. Okay, the article in JAMA, this is not high times. Journal of the American Medical Association last week said, in the states where medical marijuana is legal, and I heard somebody mention this, there is a 24.8% reduction in overdose deaths. The longer it's been legal in a state, the greater the reduction. The largest was 33%. As a safety person, if I look at the things that are killing my fellow Americans and my fellow veterans, and I know that this works, then I have an obligation to travel 6 hours from North Carolina to tell you that you're on the right track. And these people are right. Everybody keeps saying, time, we need more time. Martin, the great preacher Martin Luther King said, time changes nothing. It's the pressure within time by people like me and these people that causes people like you to listen. And I really appreciate your time. Like I say, if it kills cancer, if it stops pain, if it helps PTSD, I'll use the medical necessity. I will not go back to the pills. And I appreciate it. If I have any questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any questions from the committee? Ms. Parks, we thank you for your service. We're grateful for, again, all the men and women who fight for our freedom. So thank you for taking time and energy to be here today. Thank you for your time.
Yes, well, I would like to say honestly, thank you for your service, because I have several friends who are legislators. It's not easy.
No, it's
They're
not.
only 4 days a week. And I would say this to you, sir, also. Please stop thanking me for my service and stop arresting me.
Okay. I don't think I've arrested you lately, but we'll get in touch with those guys. Okay, Brian Cox and Corey Lowe and Jason Cranford, if y'all will all come on up, we're gonna have all of y'all together. I think your stories, at least Corey and Brian Cox, are similar, and Jason has been right at the center. Jason, why don't you sit in the center there? And the members of the committee, just in the Brian Cox, the father of Haley Cox, a little girl who has moved out to Colorado, kind of captured the hearts of a lot of the whole state of Georgia. Corey Lowe, who has moved out to Colorado, took her daughter out there, saw some tremendous results. Jason Cranford, who has been a lifesaver to families from all over the world, as a grower and a provider of cannabis oil, and has touched the lives of many of Georgia's citizens who have moved out there. So what I'd like to do, I know we're late, and I know people are tired, and I'm so grateful for y'all hanging in there with me. Brian,
yes, sir.
Take a couple of minutes, just tell us your story. Corey, you'll do the same thing, tell a story, and then Jason, I'm going to kind of leave the last words for you today, okay?
Thank you.
Brian, you
Yes,
jump
sir.
in?
Thank you, Mr.
If
Chairman.
you'll speak into the...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the rest of the committee for having us here today. When I was asked to speak in front of y'all today, I was very hesitant, because if you've been to the other committee meetings, you've seen my wife be the face of this fight for our family, and if you've seen her on the news, she does it very eloquently where I can't. But sorry, seeing that picture makes me miss her that much more.
I know.
on January 20th, I was in bed right before my shift, and Janaea, I was woken by Janaea screaming that she needed my help, so I came out and saw a scene that I've seen a dozen times before, but 20 years on the job as a firefighter and paramedic, and that's a mother trying to arouse her unresponsive child, and luckily Janaea knows exactly what to do too. She had 10 years in the fire service, so we did what we were trained to do. She was a respiratory arrest at that time. We got her back, called 911 for transport, and spent 2 months in the hospital in ICU with her stop breathing about 4 or 5 times a day. They tried to get us to put her into a medically induced coma, but we decided against that and against them intubating her. So that's when old high school friend of mine contacted Representative Peake on my Facebook and asked him what his thoughts on this were. He came to visit 2 of his constituents, me and my wife, in the hospital. And we described what we're going through. You could just replace everyone else's testimony. The medicines they take, the surgeries they've had, the children, you can erase their names and put Haley's name in there. I don't have to go through all that again. You can.
Tell us how she's doing now.
That's what I was going to get to. So we got out there, I guess about 6 months ago. We've been on the medicine for about 6 months, Jason's medicine, and I think she had one yesterday, and that was the first one that she had in 8 days. We were at 200 a day, 200 seizures a day, and she had 8 straight days of being seizure-free, which we didn't have pretty much 8 straight minutes before this. With all the medicine she was on, she was catatonic for 22 hours a day.
Is she off all other medicine now?
She'd wake up about 2 hours a day, and that's just cumulative through her seizures. And now she's off of one medicine, and the VNS that she's had, which has been described earlier, has been turned off. She's tracking. She's talking in her own language to us. She's actually can participate in her physical speech and occupational therapies instead of just going through emotions with her asleep and just billing insurance for it.
Tell us real quick, you're still here in Georgia?
Yes, sir. I still work here. I go out there once a month. Spend a little bit of time with them. Today's actually our anniversary, so spending that apart. But yes, sir.
Well, thank you for sharing your story.
Thanks, sir.
The whole state has been watching.
Thank you for all y'all's work.
Thank you. Corey, you want to chat just a little bit, Ms. Lowe, about your story?
Yes, sir. I'll be brief. And tomorrow, my daughter Victoria, she'll turn 13 years old. And when she was diagnosed with mitochondrial disease, we were told she would not make it out of adolescence. So we are thrilled, of course, as any parent with every birthday and milestone. And we were able to go to Colorado this past summer and start the medicine provided through the Hope Foundation, the same medicine that Haley's on, Haley's Hope. And almost immediately, Victoria went from, in fact, her last day of school, she was transported to the ER. They wouldn't even wait for us to get there because she had 15 seizures in less than 30 minutes. The entire time we were in Colorado, she had maybe 15 seizures while we were on this medicine. And so I'm just here as a representative for, advocate for my daughter, and just asking in reference to the clinical drug trials. We don't know how cars work. We don't know how computers work. We just know that we enjoy them. And I enjoyed meeting my daughter for the first time in 12 years. At the last committee hearing, I wore Abe's button. He passed away in July. And since then, as you know, Trinity's now passed away. And her mom's picking up her ashes as I'm here speaking to you all. And there's no time. There's no time. So in reference to your clinical drug trials, I'm thankful you're doing that, but it's for me and my family.
we're not interested, but I appreciate it. We're interested in safe and legal access now to cannabis oil, but I appreciate your efforts.
Any questions from the member? There's me for the two parents.
Can I ask for you, David, how long did it take once your children were out there for you to get on the medication?
We got on as soon as we got our two daughters' appointments in Red Card. Jason was able to provide the medicine for us. We would have been on a waiting list, but my wife introduced me to Jason over the phone. We talked and you will see in a little while that the way he described it to me, I put complete trust in him. And as soon as I got out there and we were legal, we were able to receive the medicine. So maybe 2 weeks.
It's the same for us. We within a week, just because he doesn't have a waiting list.
Jason, Mr. Cranford,
Yes,
why
sir.
don't you chat with us, tell us your story. I know it's late in the day. You came a long way to testify, and so we want to give you the respect and time that you deserve for what you've done for this family. So the floor is yours. I want to hear kind of what you're doing out there.
Yes, sir. I'll give you a little background, too. So my name is Jason Cranford. I grew up in Warner Robins, Georgia. I moved from Warner Robins to Athens, Georgia to attend Truett McConnell Christian Academy for my college education. I moved to Boulder, Colorado in 2009 after reading several research studies performed by Dr. Raphael Meshulam in Israel, because federal law prohibits the types of clinical studies that Dr. Gwynn is describing. The United States government funded Israel to do clinical research on the non-psychoactive compound cannabidiol found in a cannabis plant. His research intrigued me, and I decided to research the compound further. All forms of cannabis were illegal in Georgia in 2009, so I chose Colorado as a safe haven to perform my studies. Once I arrived in Colorado, I immediately found an analytics lab that could test the products I was researching and developing. I was the first CBD strain ever tested and recorded in the state of Colorado in the early part of 2010. Everyone in the Colorado industry thought I was wasting my time by trying to breed the THC out of cannabis plants and raising the non-intoxicating cannabidiol level. I disagreed, and I continued on with my breeding projects. After 5 years of breeding, I ended up lowering the THC content of my strain from the original 7% down to 1%, while raising the CBD levels from 7% to around 20%, which created a non-intoxicating strain of cannabis with many medical uses. This breeding project caught worldwide attention through the publishing of my lab reports. As a result of this, I was hired by a pharmaceutical company and asked to participate in cannabinoid research on a clinical level. We applied to the National Institute of Health, commonly known as NIH, for the exclusive use of the government-issued 507 patent on cannabinoids as antioxidants and neuroprotectants. We were granted exclusive use of this patent. Through my work with this late-stage biopharmaceutical company, I was privileged to experience controlled studies in a lab setting at a biotech center in Pennsylvania that specializes in clinical trials for pharmaceutical companies that wish to bring products through FDA clinical trials. We performed toxicology reports on cannabidiol to see what level this compound becomes toxic. The result of this study was amazing. What we found was that the compound was not toxic at any level and served as a neuroprotectant in a petri dish. I am currently involved in the first ever university research study in Colorado being performed on CBD and seizure control. This study is unprecedented, and the results will be published through PubMed in the National Institute of Health. The problem with the pharmaceutical company was we were not able to distribute CBD oil until we completed phase 3 clinical trials and had the blessings of the FDA. This is a 7-year process at a minimum. At this time, I was receiving many requests from patients in Colorado with life-threatening illnesses to try my CBD products to treat medical conditions ranging from epilepsy to cancer. I decided to give up my career in the pharmaceutical arena and start a 501c3 nonprofit in Colorado, that helped individuals with debilitating medical conditions to allow access to safe, reliable, lab-tested CBD medicine. This nonprofit is the Flowering Hope Foundation. Through 5 years of treating patients with CBD medicine, I've found numerous medical conditions that show efficacy in treatment with this natural organic compound. These conditions include cancer, intractable seizure disorders, pain relief, MS, cerebral palsy, neurodegenerative disease, Alzheimer's, and Parkinson's. I have seen amazing results that could be considered a miracle through the use of a standardized dose of this compound. To date, I have treated a dozen or more of my fellow Georgians who are considered refugees in the state of Colorado after moving to Colorado to seek legal access to this life-saving medicine. The most dramatic results I've seen were with Haley Cox. When she arrived in Colorado, she was experiencing hundreds of seizures daily. She was in PICU in Atlanta, Georgia, and was moved to Colorado to try CBD oil after FDA-approved pharmaceutical drugs almost took her life by causing her to stop breathing. The first week of treatment, the Cox family noticed improved cognitive behavior and an increase in motor skills. After a month or so, Haley's seizures were reduced to about 50%. After 3 months of treatment, her seizures were decreased from hundreds per day to about 10 seizures a day. After 4 months of treatment, Haley is experiencing seizure-free days and has been completely seizure-free, besides the one small seizure, for over 8 days now. This is one of many success stories that I have documentation on that show dramatic seizure reduction through the use of this life-saving medicine. Another patient I've seen a miracle with is a child from Minnesota named Lily. When I met this little girl a few months ago, she was experiencing hundreds of seizures per day and was not able to walk because of loss of motor skill as a result of epilepsy. Within 60 days, Lily was able to walk, run, and play on swing sets and playgrounds without assistance. Her motor skills and coordination were corrected through the use of CBD oil. Some people might say that these observations are anecdotal. I disagree. We have performed EEG reports on most of our patients prior to CBD treatment and then performed a secondary EEG report after 60 days of treatment. What we discovered was a dramatic reduction in seizures as well as an increase in Hertz reading and neurological activity. The brain of a healthy individual operates at around 6 Hertz. Most of the epileptic patients are operating at a Hertz level of 2. After 60 days of treatment, the Hertz levels are being increased to 5+, which is borderline normal. This is much more than anecdotal proof, and the neurologists monitoring these patients are shocked and in awe after seeing these results. Children who were previously not walking are walking now. Children who are nonverbal are talking. Children who are having hundreds of seizures per day are now seizure-free. The parents of these children are crying tears of happiness. Haley Cox says, "Mama now." After 5 years of being nonverbal, Haley is also able to sit on her own, hold her head up on her own, and she is learning to walk through therapy sessions with her mom, Janaea, and a therapist. To ensure the purity, cleanliness, and potency of the products I make for these pediatric patients, I use a state-approved and licensed third-party independent analytical laboratory that tests each product for microbials, solvents, heavy metals, and potency. Every product is lab tested for safety prior to being used by the patients. We test for molds, bacteria, and contaminants before dosing the medicine. We test for potency to ensure that we can properly dose the milligrams of CBD per pound of body weight in the patient. This allows us to provide a standardized dose to the patient that guarantees consistency in dosing. We want the children to receive the exact same dose with each batch of medicine, so the analytical reports are necessary to achieve this. It is possible to develop this life-saving medicine in Georgia with safeguards in place to prevent recreational use as an intoxicating product. A tight regulatory system created through legislation could prevent abuse and diversion. 23 states in this country have legalized this form of medicine and have prevented abuse and diversion through the implementation of tightly regulated codes and statute. Georgia could find this middle ground as well, where patients will receive life-saving medicine without the state having to experience diversion into the non-regulated black market.
Mr. Cranford, thank you. Appreciate your testimony. You're welcome. You up for answering some questions? It's late in the day.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Committee, Dr. Wynn.
Mr. Granger, where was that published? Your results of the EEG?
We have a neurologist that we're working with out of Oklahoma who has access to that. If I could get your email address after the hearing, I'll forward it to you.
I'd love to see that because that, I think you have national attention, and How many patients have had those before and after?
I've treated over 200 patients to this date, and currently I'm treating over 100 patients in Colorado, and I've got 50 patients that are signed up for the university research study.
Okay, so do you have data on these 50 or so?
Absolutely. We have blood work data, pre-CBD EEGs, post-CBD EEGs, seizure tracker reports that show the slope, the downslope in seizures.
Is there anything on the internet I could go to that would tell me the results of those studies?
Again, if I could get your email address, I can put you in touch with my pediatric neurologist in Colorado who's monitoring the patients for the university study.
That'd be really important. Not just for me, I don't, because I'm just one panel member, and I'm not even just a guest. But what I think is important is that everyone in this room, and all the scientists and others that are looking at this thing, have that to analyze and approve and confirm, so that there's more confidence out there that this is effective. So that would really be really important.
I agree, and most of the neurologists that I've talked to nationwide, they rely on PubMed through the National Institute of Health to look at their research studies, and unfortunately there's no PubMed publications on CBD and epilepsy. And so
You have immense data. It must go back months, and I'm just a little surprised.
Years.
Years. And why? Well, then I'll ask you this: why in years of all this data have you not made a peer-reviewed publication of this data?
unfortunately, it's hard for me to find a neurologist that's willing to risk his reputation by publishing something through PubMed. I did find one neurologist that attempted to do it, and PubMed, the National Institute of Health, did not want to publish the study.
NIH didn't want to publish a study, and the reason PubMed is?
Because the colleagues, I don't know if you're familiar with how PubMed works, but
PubMed is a search engine. So that's...
So there's publications, there's research studies published through PubMed, through the National Institute of Health, and these publications have to be reviewed by multiple doctors. So if one doctor writes a study that he wants to publish through PubMed of the National Institute of Health, it has to be validated by other physicians, and that's where we hit a snag until this university in Colorado agreed to step up to the plate and back these doctors up.
That would be huge. So the University of Colorado is taking your data and retrospectively looking at it and then going to make inferences, going to make conclusions on it.
Correct. It's Colorado State University to be specific, and what we're doing is a single blind study. Unfortunately, with federal funding at universities and academic medical institutes, these universities are not allowed to monitor live patients. So what I've had to do is design a protocol where we're using the university as an information-only study, and then I had to create a buffer and put a buffer in between the university and the patients. And the buffer is a pediatric neurologist that collects the patient data, and we have to black out all the information, and then the university does the study.
It sounds as though you already have an enormous amount of data for a case control study, a retrospective case control study, before treatment and after treatment on at least 50, maybe more patients than that. And that would really be important to know. Of course, you see all of them. Some of them, see all of them that do that. Anybody that does really, really well, anybody that doesn't, then compare. Just to see if it's a trend. And now, if you have that, just you would just off your pulse beyond your interest.
I do, but unfortunately, I'm not able to submit stuff to the National Institute of Health, and even if I did, they wouldn't listen to me.
So it doesn't have to be NIH. Why don't you just take the data you have, get a scientist who knows about clinical research trials to look at the data, and then make a report. Just do a report retrospectively. It doesn't have to be placebo controlled. That's would be nice, but what you have is more than EEGs and changes of 60 days and all that, and I mean that would be a really helpful thing to do.
I agree.
Would be able to be reviewed and critiqued, both positively and negatively, by others, and then you get more information out of that, and then decide maybe better study.
Maybe you got a neurologist who can
I
help.
agree. It sounds like you're. Are you volunteering to help me do this?
You see the problem he faces, yeah.
I'm really not in that kind of position, but I would love to be able to maybe put you in touch with somebody.
See, that's what they all say.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'll take a shot.
Good question, Dr. Quinn. Thank you. Okay, any other questions? Yes,
May
Ms.
I,
Lowe.
may I ask a question of you, Doctor? And I mean no disrespect, I'm just curious, how come, if you can answer, maybe you can't, I'm just asking because you're a doctor, and I haven't had a chance to ask a doctor, why is it that the patients that are coming in with Ebola, they don't have to wait for an FDA-approved drug? Why is that? And my child does.
IND status.
Well, that's one thing. You know, I have my own opinions, and they may be different from what you think they are, about this whole product. I'm just wondering, so the question you have is what he said, it's an investigation, new drug status that this thing has, and it was given as emergency and so forth. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm not saying this shouldn't be I'm not saying this shouldn't be given to everybody in this room or whatever, or that it shouldn't be legal. I'm just suggesting that we need to know more about it because there are many products that come along that seem to be absolutely wonderful that after a year or two turn out to be not so. This may not be one of them. I'm just saying it is. In the meantime, you can, that's a political decision by the federal government and perhaps in this case by the state of Georgia of how to circumvent, either change the laws or circumvent the laws in the meantime. And that's another story about that's not.
Reverend Grant, you have a question?
Well, to further, I think it depends upon what the doctor said. I think you're exactly right. For some of us, it's the testimony, and that's all we need. For others, they've known this for a long time, and they just agree with the idea of it. But I think in the medical community or parts of scientific, that data you're sitting on, man, that is key. Because I didn't know that prior to coming into this. And I think it would just create another layer of strength, another layer of credibility. So that I go back into my district when I talk to folks, and I talk to folks just this morning when I stopped to get my coffee, I had a conversation, where are you going today? It was an opportunity for me to say, this is great, this is what we're going to be doing, this is what we're going to be talking about. And so I think that data, you're sitting on years of data. And for somebody to say, oh, this is just 4 months into it, we have years of data. And I think that just strengthens the idea. And then I know we joked about it a little bit later, but now you've got an email for another neurologist that maybe after talking, and I'm not putting the doctor, by no means, I have great respect, I'm glad he's on this panel. But now to couple the gentleman, the doctor in Oklahoma.
Yes, sir.
The neurologist in Oklahoma,
yes,
now the Colorado State University, I believe it was.
Yes, sir.
The more that we can get out, the more that we can straighten, the more we can reference. Here's the data. I think that's fantastic. We need to pursue that. We need to make sure that we get that in the right hands.
I got a couple questions for you real quick, and then answer these real quick if you can. Everybody's ready to go home. Is there a THC level that is intoxicating? We talk about 0.3%, 1%, but is there an amount that is?
Well, there is.
That would be considered having a high effect? I'm just curious.
Yeah, normally the strains of cannabis that are floating around the recreational markets in California and Colorado are typically 15% THC and higher. What's commonly called on the streets as swag weed, Mexican weed, whatever you want to call it, those are typically around 5 or 6%. Anything 2% or below, you're going to have to smoke so much of it to catch a buzz off of it or get high that it's not even worth smoking, really. So 2% would be about the limit where it starts becoming intoxicating.
All right. You mentioned real quick to you in your speech that there were conditions that would qualify for potential benefit from cannabis oil, and you listed off a handful. Could you hit those very quickly again, too? It's not just seizure disorders, though, is that?
No, yeah, I don't even need to look at my notes. Okay. It's cancer. It's greatly benefited. THC, as he was saying, THC causes apoptosis in cancer cells. It causes an electrical signal causes the death of the cancer cell, while the THC protects the healthy cells. Okay. So cancer is one. Estrogen-positive cancers like breast and ovarians and other. Multiple sclerosis, it greatly affects that. Cerebral palsy, pain relief, intractable seizures. And there's a couple more. Alzheimer's, any neurodegenerative disease, Parkinson's.
And even if you're saying those conditions would be benefit even from a high CBD, low THC strain, similar to what Haley's Hope?
Correct.
Or
Correct. I think the question was asked earlier, how does it work? I believe he asked it. Well, the way CBD works is it's a neuroprotectant. So what's going on with seizure patients is you have these things in your brain called AMPA receptors, and your neurons perform a process called synapses. That's where the electrical signals are going back and forth across your brain, and it causes your motor skills and your body movements and your speech. Well, CBD acts as a neuroprotectant, so when synapses is performing incorrectly and neurons are getting zapped over and over again, it'll protect those neurons from being damaged. And epilepsy causes brain damage, which makes you lose motor skills. So the CBD actually acts as a neuroprotectant to protect your brain from being damaged by the seizures.
so some of those, a lot of the folks, not just the parents of seizure disorder kids, but other folks who testified today could benefit from cannabis or from like Haley's Hope. That's just one of them. I want to make sure that's clear.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's not just seizure-based disorders.
Real quickly, we keep hearing stories of folks that are against this saying it's not safe, there's purity. Every batch that you give to your patients undergoes strict safety procedures and is tested by an independent third-party lab. Is that correct?
That's correct. You've actually seen my mini lab in Colorado. Is set up like a clean room. The room is wiped down, bleached in between each extraction process. We don't use pesticides. We grow organically, and then once the product is finished, I send it to an independent lab which tests for microbials and solvents.
All right. And last question, then we'll see if a lot of people have said that there can't be a business model that works to cultivate, process, and dispense Charlotte's Web or Haley's Hope. Is there a business model that works for just a high CBD, low THC strain of cannabis?
Well, there is a business model. I chose to do a nonprofit 501c3 for my distribution model because a lot of the patients that we deal with are refugees. They're moving across country. They're having to use Journey of Hope funds to get there because they can't even afford to move. They can't afford the medicine. So we basically set a base price of what it costs us to produce the medicine, and anything on top of that, people donate money. So some of the patients that we deal with, like Sebastian Cott, for instance, he overpays every time he gets his medicine, so that other patients that can't afford it, that is credited towards them, so they get the medicine free of cost. And then let me reiterate too, with a nonprofit, salaries can be paid, so it's not like everybody's expected to work for free. So we look at a standard salary for the type of job that's being done, performed, look at national averages, and that's what the people get paid is salary, and then the nonprofit doesn't turn a profit.
So it can be done, George.
Absolutely.
Mr. Chairman, can I say my mind? If we could have as many doctors and LEO who tell us in a negative way, we need more proof and we need more testing, we can have just as many of doctors and law enforcement officers telling that to state and federal governments in a positive way. We support this. We support more proof. We support more testing. Then we may get that testing, but until then, it's not going to happen for the testing.
Ms. Lowe, Mr. Cox, thank you for sharing your stories, and we are so excited that there's been positive results for your kids, and that is great news. Mr. Cranford, thank you for what you're doing for Georgia families and families all over the country, and I appreciate you making the effort to be here today. So thank you all. Both
Yes, sir.
Okay, to the members of the committee, our next meeting will be October 1st in Georgia Gwinnett College. We'll give you more details, and thank you for all of you who have traveled here. We are adjourned. Thank you.